Hereby call this meeting to order. This is the February 13th, 2018 Superintendent's Workshop agenda. The purpose of the workshop is for Dr. Rendell and staff to present the school board members with information that may appear on future agendas. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Rendell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the purpose of the workshops is to share information. Some of the information that we're going to share with you are items that will come up at a board business meeting. Some of the information we share with you is just information to share, progress monitoring and that kind of thing. We have three topics that we want to cover today, three different presentations. We're going to be talking about the strategic plan monitoring framework in just a few minutes. After that, we're going to take a look at the science instructional materials adoption process. The board and the audience may recall that this is a year where we're adopting science instructional materials for next year. So we want to give you an update on that whole process and where we're at with that, share some information with you, and get some feedback from you on the process. And then the last presentation we'll have today is about the Pelican Island Community Partnership School Model. The board may recall, the audience may recall, that Pelican Island has engaged in what's called a community partner school model, and we want to give you an update on the progress of that. So the first thing that we're going to do today is dive a little bit into the strategic plan monitoring framework. The board and the audience may recall that last year we crafted a 5-year strategic plan, and we said that the 5-year strategic plan was not going to be a document that just sits on a shelf. It wasn't going to be something we just created and made and look nice and pretty and just put somewhere. This was going to be an action plan. And as we go throughout the year, we're going to refer to the strategic plan. We make decisions about what to do, what not to do, where to spend money, where not to spend money, how are we doing in one area, what's our performance level, and that kind of thing. So after the creation of the strategic plan, we developed a monitoring framework. And we've spent a few work sessions going through that monitoring framework. Monitoring framework is actually kind of a living document. As we figure out how to measure some of these things in the strategic plan, that document kind of changes. The board may recall that, goal 1, student success, a lot of that's standard measurables, student achievement on test results, attendance data, suspension data, stuff like that. When you get into some of the other goal areas, it's not as much quantitative data, it's more qualitative data. What kind of student recognition programs do we have? Are they effective? Are they not effective? What kinds of partnerships do we have with our community organizations? How can we grow those and that kind of thing? So that stuff's a little bit more nebulous or hard to capture, yet we do have it all areas to capture that data in the strategic plan monitoring framework. Today, though, we want to dive into just student success. We're going to take a few minutes and look at some mid-year measures that we have, really gauging our progress in some of those areas and trying to meet some of those targets for student performance. So Mr. Green and Mrs. Dampier are going to walk us through the monitoring framework and show us some areas where we have some data at the mid-year, see where we are we on track in certain areas, and see where we hope to be by the end of the year. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Green and Mrs. Dampier, and we have a lot of documents for you. You have a copy of the strategic plan in front of you, a copy of the monitoring framework, and a copy of a PowerPoint that we're going to be jumping back and forth. So Mr. Green.
Thank you, Dr. Rendell. Good afternoon, board members. So orient you to the documents that you have in front of you. You should have a strategic plan monitoring framework PowerPoint, and you should have a copy of the strategic plan monitoring framework itself. The reason that there's a separate document is sometimes there's some data we want to give you an update on that's progress monitoring that's not exactly aligned with one of these indicators. So we didn't put it on the plan. We're going to show it separately. So you'll see that when we go through those items. So we are going to flip back and forth. And if you recall, the strategic plan is laid out with goals, then measurable objectives, and measures of success. And then for each one of those measures of success, we have a data update. So I'm actually going to zoom in on this a little bit. So we can focus on the updated data. Sam? So starting at the top, and before we begin, I just want to thank a couple people, Greg McDonald in the back, Brian McMahon, and Dr. Arnett. You'll see that there's a lot of data here that's analyzing individual courses for students that took a lot of programming to come up with, so I wanted to make sure I didn't forget to thank them for all their hard work in getting this done. So let's start at the beginning with graduation rates for all students in each subgroup. And if you'll notice, the current state remained the same, but we have made a few changes from the original spreadsheet you saw. We've divided the current state and the progress into 2 columns, so we can now show you the year or the data source. As you'll notice, graduation rate is a lagging indicator. So the current state was 15-16, and the progress was 16-17. Whereas iReady, we had up-to-date data, it's leading data. The baseline was 16-17, and the outcome was 17-18. So without those there, you weren't quite sure where the data source was coming from, if it was this year's data or last year's data. So 16-17 graduation rate by subgroup and overall, as you know, the graduation rate for 16-17, which is our most recent graduation data, came out. However, you also know Dr. Rendell, I think he explained to the board there were some new rules around how they calculate graduation rate for those students who go to a private school that the district has a contract with. In the past, those students were removed from your graduation rate totally. They were out of your cohort. The new legislation takes those students and leaves them in your cohort and counts them negatively against your graduation rate. So we're going to flip over to another document. Well, let's just make sure we verbalize, for example, the goal. The current state was 87.2, and we had 2% improvements, and 89.2 was the goal. The graduation rate with the new rule in place, and that went back over all 4 years of the cohort. So any of those students in that 4-year cohort, it wasn't just last year, it affected 4 years back. Our graduation rate under that new rule came in at 87.1, which is 0.1%, basically the same graduation rate, 0.1% less than the current state that we had. However, that's why we have this separate PowerPoint. Just to give you an idea of looking at our graduation rates, we went back and ran them under the old rule and the new rule. So for example, let's take the new rule on the right. There's the 87.1 that you saw where we ended. If we were to count those students negatively in our previous graduation rates, as they are now, you can see that our graduation rate has gone from 81.2 to 84 to 87.1. So roughly a 3 percentage point increase in the rate under the new rule if you applied that to previous year's graduation rates. On the left, this was the actual old reported data. We took that new rule away and ran our graduation rate if that rule would not have been into effect, and you'll see our graduation rate 81.2, 87.2 to 90.7. So under either way, if you compare apples to apples, about a 3 percentage point, in this case 3.5 percentage point gain in our graduation rates. Does that make sense? However, when comparing just the pure published rate under the old rule to the pure published rate under the new rule, basically the same. So Dr. Rendell, we had discussions about moving 16-17's graduation rate over to be the current state. We didn't want to do that till the board saw that, but this could be the new baseline data under the new rule, and we would move that to the current state for 17-18. And then when the new graduation rates came out next year, we would update that as the outcome or progress.
So a couple points to share, some explanations. So basically, the 5-year strategic plan kicked off this year. All the things that we're doing as part of the strategic plan took off this year. The graduation rate data is lagging data, like Mr. Green said. That's last year's graduation rate is the earliest data, latest data that we have. So you're comparing graduation rate from 2 years ago to last year. If we want to count that as, the measure of this strategic plan, it's not really accurate. This year's strategic plan started this year. The graduation rate for last year would be the baseline data. However, if we go with that change, then we won't have graduation rate data this June to say, did we do well in this area? Did we accomplish our targets in this area? Because we won't get that data again until December probably of next year. Again, this is the problem with the graduation rate data being lagging data. So the conversation that Mr. Green and I had was, do you use last year's, 2 years ago's published data as your baseline and last year's published data as your measure of progress for this year in the strategic plan? That's a bit of a dilemma because that data is actually for 2 years ago and last year, and this is the first year of the strategic plan. So we thought we'd have a discussion with you. Do you think we should take the last year's data and put it over into the left column as the baseline data, which would mean we wouldn't have the right column filled out in June or July because we wouldn't get that data till next year? Or do we say we're always going to use lagging data because it's a lagging indicator? We don't get the data till December of the following year ever. So it would always be, we're always going to be behind. That's how the state is using the graduation data for the school grades. It's lagging data. High schools are getting a grade based on their graduation rate from the year prior. So that's how they're doing it. If we do that, does the board have any appetite in looking at the apples to apples comparison of the old rule and the old rule or the new rule applied back to the 15-16 data? So, those are some questions we had for you guys. Just wanted to get some feedback.
Members? Mrs. Orca recognized.
Question. So,
Is your mic on?
based on the new rule and the old rule, how come we just can't put that on there and calculate both on the framework?
We can. It's just would be two more columns. That's all. And then really going from this point forward, there would be no use of using the old rule because now we know what the rules are.
While you think about that, I'll provide some context around this because I don't think it was mentioned. Maybe it was. The rule change is the result of some districts around the state, not our districts, taking students who were probably not going to graduate. They have a contract with a private school vendor. They move them onto the rolls of the private school, and then when they don't graduate, unfortunately, the student just doesn't graduate, and it didn't hit the numbers of the districts. Our number was very small. The impact to our number was very small, whereas some districts, that number was very large. So that is why, personally, I think it's good that we should be tracking students and not shuffling them off or whatever. But the new number is better. But how does the board want to move forward in evaluating and reporting as far as the strategic plan goes? That's the question. Mrs. Simchek.
You mean the old number's better? You said the new number's better. The old number percentage rate is better. And
Well, the new number is more accurate,
is more
I should say.
accurate maybe, but,
yeah.
and in 2 years, if they change the formula again, then we'll always be chasing our tail. I just really feel that, you have to bite the bullet and just accept it. As long as we understand, this is our plan.
Right.
This is our outcome, so I have no problem with leaving the old rule, as the date and keeping this year's current data under the new rule and, just be aware of it.
Right.
Mrs. Justice.
My only concern would be that in doing that as this board changes over and that there's no historical notice of that then. So I happen to think Mrs. Sork's idea of somehow noting it this year and then moving forward is probably the smartest thing to do because I do think it's important to note this for future reflection.
It's like an asterisk, like Barry Bonds' home run record.
Well, I think the one thing that the slide shows is that in the old formula, each year we showed improvements. A significant improvement in the old formula from 14-15 to 15-16, 6 points.
Right.
And then last year, an improvement of 3.5 points. If you apply the new rules to the past, we saw improvements every year as well, not as significant. 3-point improvement, 2.8 actually each year, 2.8 from 14-15 to 15-16, and 3.1 from 15-16 to 16-17. So, we've been moving in the right direction each year. It's just when they change the rules, it doesn't always shake out that way.
Mrs. Justice.
When the monitoring framework desired goal was set, that was set with the old rules in place.
Correct.
So I think that needs to be noted. I think it's, we need to make sure that we recognize that. And either perhaps adjust what the desired goal would have been, or, I think there needs to be an adjustment. That's something we weren't aware of, but it needs to be noted.
Well, I'm sure that we can figure out a way to put it in the columns with an asterisk or something like that. I think, I agree with Mr. Frost in that I like the new rule. I just wish they had told us when the new rule, like most legislation, when they pass it, it takes effect from that point forward. This was kind of a go back.
Right, because of the lagging nature of
Understand.
the 1 year.
Yep.
Yeah. Mrs. Simchek, and then Mrs. Zork.
Well, one way to actually clearly tell would be if you took the current state, or the current, the current state, and then we had the desired goal, and that desired goal that we set, what was that percentage rate? And all you have to do is apply it to this year's and say, did we meet the percentage rate?
In some of the subgroups, we met the
And we may
percentage
not
rate,
have.
even with the rule
Sure.
change. In some of them, we didn't, and overall, we didn't.
So really looking at the percentage, that's really what we really need to see. What was the percentage rate of improvement we wanted to see or meet? Did we meet it, and did we not? Where are our weaknesses and where are our strengths? That's really what we're using this for. So I
You
don't
are
want to
100%
overthink it.
No, you're 100% right. It's just whether we wanted to note, under the old rules, we made our target. Under the new rules, we didn't.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
kind of what it would show.
So next year, we'll tell.
Yes.
Mrs. Zork, did you still have comments or
Well,
questions?
it's kind of is, but isn't related. I was just wanting to know, what was the number of students that we weren't counting in the 2016-17 that we had put into the new calculation? What was that number?
But we can get that and send it to you. It's not a significant number, to be honest.
12,
And so we're saying those numbers come from if a student went to, we're saying a private school or a private provider who?
You may remember that we talked about a company that we have contracted with called Smart Horizons.
Right.
A lot of our students use that company to make up credits. But it also is a accredited high school. So some students just enroll in Smart Horizons and graduate from there. The new rule basically says any private provider, school or whatever, that you have a contract with, if those students transfer into that school, they count as non-graduates. Even if they graduate from Smart Horizons with a diploma from them, it's not a Florida high school diploma, so they count as a non-graduate.
Mrs. Zork.
So if they transfer as a freshman, a senior, when do they start?
Anytime in that 4-year window.
Mrs. Simchek?
So in this scenario, because usually it's a student that has one or two, majority, I think, they have one or two courses that they have to go over to this subcontractor. But sometimes they take an ACT and they're enrolled in the other school, they're kind of in limbo. Whose table do they get tallied on? Do they come back to us, or, because that has happened a lot
So
with the April ACT and all that stuff.
it's whichever they're enrolled in, whichever school they're enrolled in at the end of the year, basically.
So we lose a lot that way, too. They never make it to that other school. They have the, ACT, whatever, composite for reading, let's say, or
Right.
something to that effect, and but we lose them.
Correct.
And the district pays the tuition at that private school, right?
In some
FTE
cases,
follow-
the families did it all on their own.
Okay.
If they decided, you know what, my son's not going to make the graduation requirements for the Florida high school diploma, this is an option for my son or my daughter, and they withdrew the student from us and enrolled him in them. Even though they did that, because we have a contract with the company, the state said we had to count them as a non-graduate,
Okay.
even though we didn't pay the tuition.
Mr. Searcy?
If we make this adjustment and report to the community based on this new rule and all that business, what is the state going to report? How are they going to report?
The state already has issued those numbers on,
So we're not going to have one rate that we're reporting to the public here, and the state's going to come out with one of those massive schematics with a different rate on it.
Well, this is the data that the state published already. This is last year's graduation rate.
So
And what
this-
we're saying is that the rules changed in the calculation of this rate.
Okay.
So the question before the board is, would you like to indicate that under the old rules, these would have been our numbers? These are the rules these are the numbers under the new rule. Not discounting the numbers under the new rule, but just to note that there is a difference between how those rates would have been calculated 2 years ago versus last year.
Mrs. Justice?
Perhaps to Ms. Simchek's point, though, there was a mistake in kind of setting the desired goal for the monitoring framework, that it should have been based on a gain rather than an actual number. I mean, I would imagine this isn't the only instance where something like this could happen.
Yes, as we've gone through the monitoring framework, we've seen other examples where we've said, hey, this is what the target is, and whether it's a hard number or whether it's a percentage. Some of those might need to be adjusted. This was a percentage increase, 2%.
But as we've said, the monitoring framework is a living, breathing document, and I recognize that we've, issued that, but I think, it's important to recognize when there needs to be some changes or it needs to be adapted to work to reflect the numbers properly.
I think what may be reasonable here, and we've spent a lot of time on one number in a big presentation, but what may be reasonable would be to note the delta using the old formula and then begin fresh with the 87.1.
Yep.
Does that seem reasonable or fair, members? So note that there was growth at the old rate of, was it 3.5%, somewhere around there?
Yeah.
And then from this point forward, because it's a really strange situation, and this is probably, it may happen in other categories, but graduation rates is, to my knowledge, one of the only things that we're a full year behind on.
Correct.
So when we set these numbers, we had a full year's old data using different parameters. So I think in this one instance, this certainly makes sense. Is that reasonable? Okay.
I promise you the rest of them are not as complicated.
Good.
All right,
So we
Mr.
can't do
Green.
22 minutes on every.
No, no,
All
Mr.
right,
Green.
so moving to the next data source, percentage of students scoring at or above the 50th percentile on the iReady Diagnostic, Spring Diagnostic. We had that broken down, kindergarten, first, second, third grade. One change from the original, we were measuring third grade against the FSA. We've moved them all to iReady now, so these are all iReady data. These are the percent of students at the 50th percentile. That's using, nationally normed where the students fall. This is the baseline current data. We had goals. So what we've presented is the fall and winter diagnostic data for 2017-18. So for example, kindergarten in 16-17, diagnostic end of year 50% at the 50th percentile. The goal was 52. Our kindergartners on the first diagnostic this year, 43% at the 50th percentile. Based on the winter diagnostic, 54%. So we've shown you both of those, winter and fall, for each one of those. First grade, 43, 47. Second grade, 46, 55. And third grade, 43, 48. So not FSA tested grade levels. That's where the iReady measure comes in, using the diagnostic score. So that's been added as an update, and we'll use the final diagnostic in that area at the end of the year.
So keep in mind, that's the fall diagnostic, the winter diagnostic. We're going to be measured by the spring diagnostic. So growth in each of those grade levels, some of them, they're already past what the target is. So hopefully that holds steady.
And in just a second, I'm going to, after we cover one more iReady section, we're going to show you some actual growth data on iReady as well. This is growth in proficiency, if you will, growth at the 50th percentile. But we're going to take a look at just some pure growth data throughout the year for students.
May I ask a question?
Mrs. Justice,
Thank you.
you're recognized.
So when I'm looking at this, when you see current state desired goal in this area, it's a little bit different than the area above it, correct? That 52% desired goal has nothing to do with the 50% from 16-17. It's a desired goal for the 17-18 numbers. Is that correct?
It was a 2% growth,
It was a 2% growth.
not
For-
a hard number.
Not a hard number.
Correct.
But it is different groups of kids, maybe that's what you're asking. It was based on last
based
year's
on different-
kindergartners, a 2% growth. We're hoping that the next group come in,
Right.
different groups of kids, good point. Okay. So then the next section had to deal with the number of students participating in career pathways and earning industry certifications. The original documentation that we shared with you had the percent of graduates participating and earning. We went back and took a hard look at this strategic plan. It didn't say graduates, it said number of students participating in career pathways and earning industry certifications. So we've actually updated this with numbers and percent so people can see that. So for 16-17, we had 2,476 students in a career and technical course out of the population of 4,722 courses that we looked at. So 52% of our high school students were in at one or more, this means at least one, career technical course. And then from that 52, we've set it the 2% growth. So for 17-18, we've gone ahead and looked at course records. So this is a mid-year update, and we're at 47% right now. It's not the end of the year, but 47% of our high school students currently, grades 9 through 12, are enrolled in one or more career and technical courses. Then below it, it was measuring industry certification. So now we have the number and percent of students earning an industry certification. This data can be looked at in a variety of ways, but 377 students earned an industry certification. They could have earned more than one out of the total school population, so 8% of the students earned an industry certification in 16-17. The goal was 2% to 10%, and currently we're only at 0.39%. Now, you have to know that most of the industry certifications, the vast, vast majority, are going to be at the end of the year. These 19 represent a nursing program at Vero Beach High School in which some students can take a semester and earn their certification. So don't want it to be misleading, but it is the data as of today.
Mrs. Justice, you're right.
My question would be, why would we even put it on here then? Why would we report at a mid-year something that wouldn't be, I mean, to put 0.39 on, it seems like it would be not available at this moment.
We could have represented it that way, but, you know, like I said, we're going through the monitoring framework, checking everything we can as we go.
I appreciate transparency as much as the next person, but someone that doesn't know anything picks up this document and says 0.39, boy, they're really stinking. They're really not doing a good job, are they? So I think it's important to note in those areas, like with the career pathways, I mean, scheduling's going on right now for that. I just, if the data's not available, I don't know why we would give half a story.
Mrs. Simchik.
To address that, then you just put a little asterisk at the bottom and say, all data above is as of date of 2/12. Further certifications and/or data is coming in, and as they progress, a new compilation will be tallied or something. You know, just put that little at the bottom, because otherwise, then why have the fall and the winter? You know, I mean, this is just a to-date whenever you run it, so I agree, make that little caveat on the bottom.
Duly noted, we can do that, yeah.
Mrs. Ort.
I'm just really concerned though, going back at 2016-17, we only have 377 students graduating with a certification. I'm hoping that once we get our new career tech center, that are we going to adjust, here we go back to, are we going to adjust that 10% number, because we're going to be offering so much more opportunity in that area. I would hope that our numbers we're going to be shooting higher than 10%.
Yep, so just a couple things. Number one, when you're looking at industry certifications, and that's why I said this could be looked at in a variety of ways. Not every course, so if I get in one of these courses that goes a 1, 2, and a 3, some of them I don't earn my industry certification until I finish the third course. Other courses I might take it and earn as industry certification the first year I take it. So that population, you're not going to equate to this 2,476 courses taken. You're not going to see 2,476 exams taken either. So one of the things we thought about, and I talked with Dr. Ned, is adding below this, is adding how many actual tests were taken and what percentage of those tests were passed. So 8% of the students are earning an industry certification out of the whole school population, but we might have a pass rate of 98 or 99 or 100% of those. So we'll probably add something below there to give you an idea of how many tests those 377. That might have been out of 400 tests total.
Well, I would also think that since this is a 5-year plan, that the board will revisit it. And in subsequent years, say you want in year 3 to have, 12% once those resources come online. I think that's a good point. It's totally reasonable to revisit that as a board. Mrs. Simchek.
Well, we keep throwing in all these moving parts, but like, that's the truth, though.
Strategy.
Because you can't get in automotive. So we might want to raise it up to 50%. Wow, everybody gets out because they could be college bound, but they still are going to get, as my child, a business entrepreneur, it's illustrator, I think, a certificate, but it is a 3-year course. It is a 3-year course. So even though it's a 3-year course, and then there's only so many seats, and there's only going to be so many seats at the school, so that's hard to, I wouldn't even know. You can have that. Come back to us and let us know. I don't, but it is, so it's hard to look up and say, because you could first look at it at a glance and say, wow, that's not a lot. But if there's only, let's say, 400 open certificates and we did 377, then that's pretty good.
Right.
So it's so hard. The news in this area, needs to be,
Well, it depends.
digested differently.
Same thing if you look at the line item above it. Right now it says 47% of the students are in career and technical ed courses, and that's actually appears to be a decline from last year. Well, where are those students going? Well, when we get to another slide, you're going to see that we have a lot more students taking advanced courses in college prep than we had in the past. So some of these goals are going to be competing interests. So where we go up in one area, it might cause us to go down in another. So we don't want it to go down anywhere, but there's only so many students to go around.
Mrs. Zork.
No, and the only reason I do mention that I would like to see the number increase because we are investing so much time, energy, and money into it. So I would hope that's a result.
Yeah, I have no doubt that with the technical center opening that those seats are all going to be filled and those students are going to be successful.
And over time, this percentage is what is important. I think, Ms.
Right.
Simchik, you mentioned that earlier, that as long as we understand the metric, we want to keep increasing that percentage. But just so the board knows, we are probably going to, when end of year, you're going to see probably some expanded data under career and tech to try to give you the full picture of what's happening there. Okay? The next section had to deal with the percentage of students scoring at level 3 and above overall and by subgroup. When you saw this data at the beginning of the year, you only saw the 52% overall, all students. That's from the school grade. We now, this winter, the subgroup data for the baseline came in. It's called the demographic report or the EdStat. So we've denoted where we got that. We now have the demographic data. So we were able to add our goals along the way. However, iReady for predicted proficiency, 3rd through 8, and that matches FSA, fall and winter, iReady doesn't break it down by subgroup. That's an enhancement we've asked them for. Many districts have asked for it. So right now, we have overall data of fall and winter at 50 and 51% predicted proficiency again. So on the left is the state actual data, 52, and on the right is what we're currently being predicted to score at using the iReady tool. And again, it's as of winter.
So do the databases for iReady and Focus not communicate?
The
this point?
databases for iReady and Focus do not communicate at this point, no.
Okay.
So the demographic data, they are working, that's something they're working on in their tool to be able to break it down by subgroup. And then you see for mathematics, the state data was 52.3, and then each subgroup is listed below. The fall predicted proficiency on iReady was 54, winter 54. So right in line with where the goal would be. Again, these are different groups of kids. As Ms. Justice pointed out, is a good point to keep in mind. Okay, so switching over now to science and social studies. Science and social studies, we didn't put an outcome data. iReady doesn't have science and social studies data. However, we are going to flip over and show you some benchmark data. But we have been able to fill in all the subgroup data now and set goals for those. So let's switch over to the PowerPoint. We had graduation rate. And we just covered a lot of iReady proficiency data. We did want to share some growth data with you. iReady for every grade level sets a number of points that each student in that grade level should grow. 36 points, 28 points. At a half a year, the student should have earned half of those points. It's a linear growth model. So at the bottom, it's denoted that an average growth of 1.0 would mean the student grew their full year in iReady, the full 36 points or 28 points, whatever the grade level is. So just to give you an idea about growth, in kindergarten through second grade, and we've broken that to the non-FSA grade levels, the average growth in reading is 0.79. So that means, on average, they've grown more than a half a year. 0.5 would be half a year. And then next to it is the percent of students achieving their half a year growth. So 68% of the students have already met their half a year growth, and on average, they're growing more than a half a year. Math, the average growth is 0.73, with 68.8 or 69% of the students meeting their half target. Ooh. For 3 through 8, we've broken that out as the FSA grade levels. I will give you a caveat. This is the first year of our secondary schools coming on iReady. The data is lower than the elementary. The elementary was lower, and then the second year was higher. So this is the first year of implementation. But 3 through 8, the average growth is still more than a half a year, 0.59 in reading and in math. And then at the bottom, we've aggregated kindergarten through 8 as a total district. Students on average are growing 0.65 of a grade level in reading and 0.63 of a grade level in math. So just wanted to share some growth data with you.
Oh, Mrs. Ork recognized.
Just, I think I had mentioned it before, but I would like to see, because 3 through 8, that is such a large span when we're looking at elementary and middle school. I would really like to see the data for 3 through 5th and then 6th through 8th.
Okay.
Because to me, there's certain areas that I feel personally that I'd like to see us improve. And that's the 6th through 8th. So, but not being able to see that data, I can't really bring that information forward.
Duly noted.
Members, Mrs. Justice.
Thank you. Could you, or maybe Ms. Dampier or Dr. Rendell could speak a little bit about implementation and that second year and what a difference that makes and why that makes a difference. And then the other thing I just want to mention is that 0.79 at the halfway mark. So we're on track for those students that some of our students will be moving, this is an average. So some of our students are moving a year and a half in a year. Some of our students are moving 2 years in a year. These are really amazing numbers. And we know that this data was, aligned with that FSA. So, I mean, I just think it's important to note for a moment that, that 0.79 is remarkable.
So to answer your first question, last school year was the first year we used iReady with the elementary schools. And we saw them basically learn how to use it as a formative assessment tool. And so this year, they're much more accustomed to using it as a formative assessment tool, as a tool to help them improve their instruction. So this year is the first year with the middle school teachers using iReady as a formative assessment tool. So they're learning how to use it. So again, the results are probably not where we want them to be, but we're also not sure they're as accurate as they could be because, again, it's a new tool. So next year, I would imagine they'll be more accurate. Does that mean they'll be higher? Well, I hope so, but, Mrs. Dampier, anything to add?
I will also say that last year we focused a lot on the number of minutes and not as much with the blended learning, which is, the teacher is the most important person in the room to help drive instruction for student achievement. And this year with our middle school lessons learned as well with our elementary, we noted that we wanted to make sure our teachers were trained with the blended learning process, which of course shows the small group instruction. The kids are going on the computer for their learning path, but then they're meeting with the teacher on small group instruction. Our middle school teachers are still learning. There's a lot of reports that we're showing them, looking at individualized student growth and the different strategies and tools that they have available to actually plan instruction are available to them. So they're still learning the system as well. So the goal is, like we saw last year, compared to this year for K through 5 is that we've seen an improvement overall, and we hope to see an improvement overall for middle school next year. And the teachers are actually utilizing the data. They're pulling small groups in the classroom. We've seen it. And, they're utilizing the data to make instructional decisions. They're having whole group as well as small group instruction, and then we're providing support as well with the small group instruction, as you'll see later in the PowerPoint.
So, may I? And then we'll ask, okay. So it sounds like in the literature, you want to isolate the learning effect, which ironically isn't what we're trying to do here. We want to separate that out of the learning how to use the system piece
Yes.
for the instrument to set that aside. And one thing that seems to be coming up over and over again here is the concept of cohorts and longitudinal studies. And if we can move in that direction, I'd be super happy because, I mean, while there may be some roll-off of maybe 10% or something like that, students who are retained or move away or whatever, to be able to really look at our data and say this group of students year to year is getting this amount of growth. And the reason why is, direct instruction, small group, whatever seems to be working. Is that somewhere where we can head with our strategic plan, or is that somewhere we're already headed, or?
I can tell you that we are exporting this data into Performance Matters Unify, so it will be flagged into the student, so we can look at a group of students later and do a cohort analysis with it.
Okay. Mrs. Simchick.
How about running, does this have a module in it or some sort of report for a parent? So when the teacher goes to conference with the parent, that's simplistic, where it not only shows them, but then how it will help the teacher to give the parent a tool to say, because I know they move on, or they stay and they move on, how can?
There is a parent report that the teachers can use at conferences and send home. It shows the areas of strengths and areas of weakness, and it shows how the parents can help as well. But we really want to stress that that small group instruction during the day is really going to, improve our student achievement.
Mrs. Justice, you're recognized.
Just to speak to Ms. Simchek's point, last year when we started using iReady, when I went in for conferences, that was something that the teachers kind of gave me the report, but I don't know that they had a real depth of understanding about it, and they didn't really speak to me about it, and there weren't tools given to me as a parent to work with my individual student. Now, this year has been a completely different experience for me. Not only do they understand the report, they're using it to help guide homework. Yeah. And to help me to be a better parent at home, to help to work with my students in some of the areas like, blended letter sounds, different things like that they might be struggling with. So that's been really neat for me as a parent, and I've really seen the benefits.
And my last question, is there we have students that go on to high school that are not on level, and we find this out when they go to take the FSA, and then we try to scramble with the ACT and all that. Is there a module for a 9th and 10th grade?
No, it goes up to 8th grade.
So what tool are the 9th and 10th grade reading teachers using?
Right now,
since this is a great tool.
Right now, they're using Ames Web. The goal, we are actually looking at a progress monitoring for our 9th and 10th graders that we hope to bring to the board soon. We're letting the reading teachers vet it as well as the union. But we should be bringing that soon for a workshop and have you look at it. We have not forgotten about our high school students.
And I have to say, and just from personal experience, I can tell you, and we know from when we took the ACT, that we had 132 or 137 students fail the FSA, but pass the ACT with a cohort of the 19 and above. So that just shows you something about the state test, which I'm very against. But it is our system. And so if we could do anything we can to help these students graduate, because I find those students, although as some fall through the hopper and be able to progress, we get down to that last situation where it's usually reading that we find someone going over to, I'll call it New Horizon, I forgot the name of that.
Smart Horizon.
Smart Horizon. And that's a shame that our FSA test is that hard, but a college readiness test a kid can pass.
Mrs. Justice.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think a lot of that we've seen in this district is that we haven't had progress monitoring, so the students have been behind and no one was really catching it. So I think the fact that you're seeing these learning gains here of 0.79 halfway through the year, moving students a year and a half, 2 years in a year, hopefully we're not going to have this situation in high school anymore because we're paying attention. So the progress monitoring tool, to me, I mean, it's going to change the whole face of the district. It's really good for the kids.
Mrs. Ork.
Okay, I have a question for Mrs. Dampier. I know we keep talking about pulling the kids aside and the teachers are given the small group instructions, and then the other students are taking the assessment on the iReady. So my question is, when we're in elementary and we have in the elementary schools where the teacher might have 25 students and 40% are below the area that we would like to see them. But when we go over into the middle school, when one teacher has 120 students, and they have to formulate special instruction for, let's say, 45 students ongoing, how are we accommodating that? Because that's a huge difference between having 25 students to 120 students. Then if 40% of those students need that special small group instructions, what are we doing to accommodate our middle school teachers to make sure that they have enough time in the day to teach the students that are on grade level, but accommodate the other students that need the extra help?
I know a lot of the schools are providing collaborative planning time where the teachers can get together and look at their data and then come up with a plan of how they're going to provide that support. A lot of our middle schools have Roar, Finn, Cowboy, 20 minutes extra. And one of our middle schools, they're actually holding everyone accountable, including the science and the social studies teachers. They all got trained on iReady to make it a school-wide initiative, not just the ELA, language arts, and math. What we've asked is that the reading teacher and the ELA teacher work together, collaboratively together, to make sure that if that kid does not have a 90-minute block of reading, that they're getting 15 minutes a day or during roar time. The same thing for math. Some of them during math time, they're extending time to science. Maybe the science teacher is integrating some of the standards for math and providing those kids with time in the science class. So every school looks different, but they're getting their minutes in. We just had a data chat with all of the principals. We had groups, cohorts of principals meeting, talking about their data and what they're doing at different schools and how they're meeting to talk about the data and plan for instruction. And they're all doing it very, very different. But they're all making sure that the students are provided time to get on the computer to get what they need as far as the minutes.
Okay. Thank you for that. Mr. Green.
Yeah, we need to.
Okay. So just moving on, we had looked at some science and social studies data that we didn't have any update from iReady or anything, but we do have a benchmark assessment in biology, so we've separated science out just to biology. I will tell you that the biology benchmark test is brand new item, so it's not been correlated. So all we're comparing here is the percentage students scoring 50% of the points or higher. We won't be able to do a study until the end of the year to see if that correlates or not. But really what the teachers are using this for is at the item level, we know the items they put together tie to the standard. So at each item level, they can determine whether the student has met the standard or not. But we'll have to do a study to see how it correlates to the FSA or EOC, biology EOC, at the end of the year. And we have that broken down by subgroup. And let me click over here instead. We did the same thing for social studies. We broke out, we have a civics EOC, and we've compared the EOC exam from the end of last year to the civics benchmark test. Again, it's the students scoring in the yellow or green on our benchmark test, but we haven't, until the end of the year, we can't correlate what score equates to a level 3 or not. But it is data to show that we're progress monitoring the students in those EOC courses as well on those benchmarks. So flipping back to the framework for a second, we'll get to the section on learning gains. So we have now filled the learning gains in by subgroup. We don't have any learning gain data. That's why I showed you some iReady growth. But the learning gain formula is very complicated. Level 1 students have a certain way, a level 2 has a different, level 3 has a different. So we don't have a tool that calculates school grade learning gains. So we did not give an update there. And then we're moving into a section that is much different than you saw at the beginning of the year. And this section is the number of students successfully completing accelerated courses, advanced placement, IB, honors, and dual enrollment. So we went back and reevaluated this section and have broken it out to match the style of the equity report that you see once a year. So now we've broken it down to APIB, dual enrollment, and level 3 courses. So APIB and dual enrollment are level 3 courses, but so might be Spanish 3, career and technical. Many of those courses are a higher level 3 course. So we've given the number and percentage of students enrolled in those from 16, 17. And then we have used our enrollment data as of now to look at how we're doing enrolled in those courses as a comparison. Now you'll notice this is not broken down by subgroup. Later we break it down by subgroup. This says all, it doesn't say subgroup here, so this is all students broken down by the 3 areas on the equity report.
So before we leave that page, I do want to highlight those numbers. If you see the first one, number and percent of all high school students enrolled in at least one AP or IB course, basically 20% of the students. Last year, the goal was 22.6% of the students. Right now, we have 30. So almost, we're going from 1 in 5 to 1 in 3. So when you say, where did those CTE students go?
Right.
A lot of them went into these advanced courses. Same thing with dual enrollment. Wanted to go from 7 to 9, and we're at 9.1. Then the high school students enrolled in at least one level 3 course. That's a bit of a decline, actually, but again, some of those level 3 courses are those CTE courses, and some of those kids are now in AP or IB. Or they would have been in honors American history, and now they're in AP American history. So in some areas you see an increase, and you say that's great, and you see a decrease somewhere else. Well, it's because those students had to go somewhere else.
So the next section actually, although it talks about supporting students for their academic needs to be academically successful, the measurement tools are the same. If you remember, there was some areas on the strategic plan where we were using the same FSA data as the measurement tool. So the English language arts, the math, the science, social studies, I'm not going to go through that again. It's the exact same data that was up under the other section of level 3 and above. So we shared ELA, math. Learning gains, the same thing. This is the same learning gains tool, just used under a different section to make sure all students and subgroups have the supports needed to ensure academic success. So, and then finally, the last section talks about the number of minority students participating in exceeding in accelerated courses. And at the beginning of the year, this data was very small. You had 2 rows and it just said white and minority. We broke it out. We've now gone back and broken this out very detailed according to the equity report. So the first 3 categories are the number of students participating in APIB courses by subgroup, the number participating in dual enrollment, and the number participating in level 3 courses. So we have our enrollment data as of now comparing that. And the last 3 sections, we start measuring the performance. So we have the number and percent of AP and IB exams passed. So for Asian Pacific Islander, 48 of the 72 exams that were taken. That doesn't mean 72 students, it means 72 exams. This is the number of tests taken. Student could take more than one. Or 66.7% of the exams passed. And we've just put the current enrollment for now. We don't have the exams passed till the end of the year, but you can see the enrollment for that subgroup is up in a lot of these areas. And then the last 2 sections are the dual enrollment courses passed. Again, the number and percent. And we were able to look at dual enrollment courses passed for first semester, so we have that data in there. And then the last section is the number and percent of level 3 courses passed. I will tell you this section right here, the level 3 courses passed, these few boxes, we did find that the dual enrollment, since we separate it, was not included down here, but in the rest of the report and on the equity report, when they show level 3 courses, they include AP, IB, and dual enrollment. So I have the numbers. The percentages don't change within 0.1, but for example, where it says 39 out of 40, it's really 39 out of 41, or 95.1% when you add the dual enrollment. For Asian Pacific Islander, it goes up to 356 out of 358, or 99.4%. And I will make sure Ms. Esplin has a copy and gives you an updated copy of this and the PowerPoint that has the iReady growth. You didn't have that on Friday, so I'll get you electronic files of both of those. Okay. And just finally, Ms. Dampier's quickly, and you can just, here, I'll put it for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the support to schools that we're doing.
I just want to remind everybody that the purpose of the assessment data is to inform teachers of students' progress towards mastery of the standards, because that's what our job is, to make sure our students are mastering the standards. So with that, the Curriculum and Instruction Department is providing support to schools with school-based data chats. Our principals and our schools are actually looking at data more so now than ever. They're looking at their unit assessment data. They're looking at their formative assessment data. And they're reviewing multiple data points to see where their students are. And we're providing support as a part of that data chat. And they're looking at early warning indicators, which the IT Accountability and Assessment has given the schools a list of those students who fall as at risk, who are listed on that list for at risk. And those are students that our schools are monitoring to make sure that they're being successful in our schools. We're also looking at the previous FSA scores as it relates to how our students are doing now. We get a lot of that data from our IT department comparing iReady to FSA scores. We're also weekly looking at the iReady usage report at our schools and passing that information on to principals and actually meeting with them to talk about how can we get the usage rate up, what are you doing to improve the usage rate as well as the pass rates. We want 75% of our students performing at 75% or higher on their learning paths. And then our unit assessments data. We've been utilizing that. That is something new that we've been utilizing at each school. And we've been meeting with principals as well as data teams to help them understand what does the data show. What instructional practices will you change? How will you form your groups? So we've been providing support in that area, as well as the executive directors, principal supervisors have been going out as well to help with unit assessments. The iReady data analysis, we've been looking at trend data to assist teachers. Our specialists have gone out to schools to identify the root cause of problem areas, helping them form those tier 2, tier 3 groups. If you look at some of the iReady data, we had a lot of kids that were in tier 3, which is our most neediest group, and looking at this winter diagnostic, that number has shrunk, so we are doing some things right. So what worked, what didn't work. And then locating effective and appropriate resources in iReady. We have the toolbox which has lessons, strategies that teachers can utilize at their fingertips to, that they don't have to go search for resources to help our students. With that in mind, we also have our specialists grouped into tiered support for our schools. We have 3 different tiers, where we go out for tier 1 support, which would be our, we have a list of students, schools. That's quarterly, and our tier 2 support is once a month to schools, and our tier 3 support is twice a month. And we have those schools listed based on the iReady data, based on the unit assessment data, based on behavior data, if we need to send out our student services team to go out and provide some support as well. But as far as ELA support for our data, Wonders vocabulary, we found that the last data that we had for the fall was showing that there was a deficit in vocabulary and phonics in elementary, and so our coaches have gone out and our specialists have gone out and provided professional development in the area of vocabulary and phonics, And then they modeled annotation, because we found out with writing, some of our schools were struggling with annotating and closed reading and vocabulary comprehension, and they asked for our support in those areas. And Mrs. Hamler, our elementary specialist, has gone out to several schools, did the on-the-road show to go out and help them and model in the classrooms. She's also provided some Saturday workshops on this as well for our teachers and for elementary. Our math support for elementary, we did a vertical alignment for math. We saw that there was conversation where in elementary or middle school said, hey, what are they doing in 5th grade moving to 6th grade? What is it that we should know? So we did a vertical alignment where we met with all the math teachers. We did it with ELA as well, where they worked in groups of elementary, middle, and high school and looked at trends. Where is it that we really can help our students move? In fact, Fluency was an area that they said in all K through 12, if we can really help our students learn their facts, they'll be successful with math. So our math coach has provided professional development to our schools in that area, and she's also done some modeling in the school and assisted them with the online math fluency page that we shared at the last meeting. Secondary support, we've really focused a lot on providing that modeling and coaching of instructional routines and small group instruction. Our teachers were, some of them were afraid to try the small group instruction, but we've had some modeling and coaching of what it looks like in the classroom and support and feedback. We've actually witnessed that. We've done some walks at some of the schools. Professional development on collaborative planning with the unit planning. Our specialists have provided support in that area. How do we plan? We have an assessment. How do we do that backwards design? As well as the blended learning for iReady, because again, we said that just going on the computer is not going to get us where we need to be. We need to make sure that our teachers are providing that small group instruction. We have a way to go at the secondary level. We also wrote a grant. The Education Foundation provided a grant for ELA and for math lesson study cycle, and this is our peers in practice. They've been doing it this year. We've had 3 cycles of that, where the teachers actually do a professional development. They come together, math or ELA. They do professional development. They design a lesson. Then they randomly select someone to teach the lesson. Then they go in the classroom, and the peers are actually observing and denoting what they said. These are things that we're going to look for when we walk in the classroom. Then they come back and they talk about it and they reflect on their practices. And the goal is to actually have some of these practices be related into their other future lessons. And we've seen some changes in practices at some of the schools, even with some of us walking at the secondary level. And we've had some good feedback with that, and we think we're hoping that we're going to be able to provide that support again for ELA and for math for the lesson study again next year. Professional learning, half-day vertical alignment of ELA standards. Like I said, we did it for ELA, and we're also doing it for math. We did modeling and coaching again for math support. Dana has been going out to the schools providing that support. And professional learning, half-day, again, the vertical alignment and the collaborative planning. So we really have focused a lot at the secondary level with the small group instruction, blended learning model, and our classroom and collaborative planning. That's really been our focus for secondary. Science support, we're happy that we have a 6 through 12 science specialist this year. So with that, we've been able to provide science support K through 12 in our school with collaborative planning sessions. We've been able to provide that backwards design of how to plan with the assessment and then utilizing the test item specs and looking at the unit assessment data to make decisions as well. In those classes, we've done modeling and coaching of the routines and hands-on labs, and there's been professional development based on needs, based on principal requests, and looking at the data on standards and differentiation for our science. So basically, our support that we've provided has been based on the data and based on school requests. And our people are out in the schools so much providing that support, so we've gotten good feedback on that.
Okay. Questions on the strategic plan monitoring framework update?
No. Mrs.
request.
Suchek.
When I first looked at this, reviewing it, when we were sent, I was like, who's responsible? Mrs. Dampier, Mrs. Dampier, Mrs. Dampier. I thought, oh my goodness. And I know you're in charge of curriculum, but a quick thought. Just from, I guess, your position down to the principals, not really the principals. There's been, John Teskey's new, we've had Ms. Jones. Just, I can't keep up with the changes. If you could send a chart to us on who's, because we get a lot of, who's in charge of?
Right.
And I would just like to be able to know, I should know. And if you could just send me those updates. Most of them I do, but I found out one that I got backwards, and so I don't want to fall in that trap again. If you could just send that,
We can do that.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for your presentation.
Mrs. Justice had her hand.
Oh, Mrs. Justice.
No, all I was going to say was, I agree, I do see Ms. Dampier's name here, and this is student success, but I think that everything we do, all of us, the board, the superintendent, Mr. Teskey, Mr. Green, Dr. Long, everyone's working for student success. It's why we turn the lights on every day, right? So I just wanted to make note that I think, we're all in this together.
Mr. Chair, if I could make a few comments.
Sir.
So one of the reasons that I asked staff to prepare a mid-year kind of update on student achievement is when I got here 2.5 years ago, we did not have any formative assessment data during the year. We had no way of monitoring how our students were doing in academic achievement progress. Were we going to be able to improve student achievement at the end of the year on the FSA or whatever test we were taking? We didn't have any tools to measure that progress. So over the course of the last couple of years, we've put some of these tools in place. And so by, naming some of these data points in the strategic plan monitoring framework, it's forcing us to make sure that we're checking the work. So what gets measured gets done. So, we've seen the implementation of iReady at the elementary level last year. That was the learning year, the growth year for us. Now teachers are using it as an instructional tool. We're starting to see that at the middle school level this year. They're starting to get used to using it as a formative assessment. How does that drive your instruction after you get that data? So we're going to continue to do that at all of our grade levels. We're going to continue to monitor our progress. But, we're going to tweak the monitoring framework as we go. But I thought it was very important to share with you some information about how we're doing, but also how we're looking at how we're measuring how we're doing. And, this strategic plan monitoring framework is probably going to grow and evolve over the next 5 years. So some things we did today, some things we share with you. We took some notes. We'll probably go back and tweak and change some of that stuff. And hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be able to fill in all the boxes so we can know how we're doing.
Thank you very much. Great presentation.
Can we take a 5-minute break before the instructional materials?
We're in informal recess until 2:12. Recess. Everyone hang your coats up. Okay. Dr. Rendell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item that we'd like to talk about is the instructional materials adoption process for the area of science. The board may recall that we've engaged in this process throughout the year. There is a procedure that we must follow when we adopt any new instructional materials, and Mrs. Dampier and Dr. Jones are going to walk us through the process that we've been engaged in this year, and they're going to ask you for a little bit of input towards the end, actually. So, Mrs. Dampier?
Good afternoon. During the September 26th board workshop, we shared an overview of the instructional material adoption process and timeline. Over the past 6 months, Dr. Jones has facilitated the work of the committee members, and today she will share the recommendation of science instructional materials K through 12 that the committee is recommending. So I'm going to hand it over to her. She's facilitated.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Oh, thanks, Beth.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who worked on this committee. We had representatives from elementary, middle, and high school. We had community members. We had parents. And the timeline we shared with you last time, you could see it was very, very much in depth. And first and foremost, also a very special thank you to Becky Teskey and Pat Heiser. I will go along with the timeline, but when you start asking really scientific questions, I'm going to look back here. But it was one of those, I could say, I've been on textbook adoption. I have not been through this procedure before, but it was a really energized committee. We added an extra meeting because we didn't have enough time to review all of the materials. So it was a good time, and I think in the end, it's going to be great for our kids. So let me just go through the PowerPoint, then we'll go through some questions. Again, we're going to go through the timeline, our targets for achievement, our goals and expectations, committee recommendation, and then, of course, to the estimated budget. We started in August, as you can see, when we were forming the committee. We then went through the publisher presentations. We had an extravaganza that was open to the district and the public and very well attended. Then we sent information to our school sites to review and evaluate the top 5 choices for both elementary and secondary. Then the committee analyzed the rubrics, and we had school feedback. Then we had recommended materials displayed in our district office lobby. We put them on our website. Still today on our website, we have the petition and flyer. Kristen did a Connect Ed call to district families with the flyer of recommended materials. And then right now we're having the presentation of recommended K through 12 science materials. If you take a look at the standards here for the next generation, you can see science is being targeted to show the most growth in 2019-20 statewide. And again, this is the 5th, 8th grade and biology state average represented as 1. So you can see that we're really going for the sky on this one. And when we met with the teachers, it just wasn't looking at books. We kept thinking, how are we going to get our students there? I'm going to speak a little bit as a grandparent right now. I want science to come alive in the classroom. I want to have interaction. I want to have multimedia. Obviously, everything's online, but you just really, really want these things to come alive. So we want to engage students with current and relevant multimedia content, hands-on. Support the differentiation with interactive features. And you can see with the choices we made, we will certainly have interactive features. And the big, big thing is professional development. In fact, we were able to get discovery here for our January PD. The teachers were so excited, they wanted to start right away, hoping that this would be recommended and the board would approve. And I think we had about 65% of our teachers at that one PD, so they are ready to go. They are ready to go. The committee recommendation, this is what it was based on. We used the rubrics to review all 5 publishers. Then the school sites, it went out to all the school sites to review the publisher for each grade level over a 3 to 4 week time frame. And again, we added a December meeting because we didn't get all the materials as quickly as we thought we would. So they wanted another meeting right before Christmas, and we did it. And then the committee met and compiled all of the feedback from the teachers, schools, and came to a final recommendation. And what we have recommended, but we'll show you the different options. All students have a digital profile license for interactive resources, K through 12. All students 3 through 5, environmental, marine, anatomy, and physiology would have a hardback text. Class sets of 30 texts in 6 through 8, biology and earth space. Then, of course, the class sets of text for chemistry and physics. However, on this one, you can see that the student receives a digital access to the text in a PDF format. They could print it. And then K5, 6, 8, biology, and environmental all receive materials, hands-on kits, year 1, that align with the standards and curriculum. The standards are not changing. I know that was a question before. They are not changing. So what we're doing, we're going to be fine with the standards. And again, I think Becky and Pat told me in the last couple days that already teachers are saying, are we going to have kits? Are we going to have materials? They just want to make sure with this new order and adoption that we have the material to do the labs and so forth and be interactive with everyone. So this is option 1 recommended by the committee. You can take a look at that for yourself. All students have a digital profile. 3 through 5, environmental, marine, anatomy, have a hardback text. Class sets of 30, hardback text in 6, 8, bio and earth science, earth-based science. And then class sets of hardback text for chemistry and physics. And then with that, receive the text in PDF format. And that total is 1.551, you can see that. And that includes the PD, I'm sorry, yes, that includes the PD, because they said no matter what, we want to continue to learn throughout the year. And again, they've already started. And then option 2, this is students 3 through high school receive a hardback text. And then you can see K5, 6, 8, bio, and environmental all receive materials, hands-on kits for year 1, and that is 1.65. You can see that. And again, costs for modifying curriculum maps, scales, and rubrics, utilizing district teachers and curriculum and instruction specialists, all students would receive a hardback text. So no matter what we do, we want to make sure that teachers have professional development. I think every adoption that we go through here in Indian River County is a huge one, but science I just think is particularly huge because of what we can do with the science material, what we can do with the science adoption, and what the teachers can do with the students. So that is the presentation, and we're going to go for questions at this time.
I do have one comment. Last year, when we brought forward the social studies adoption, we were asked what was the difference between a class set or every student having, you know, a textbook in their hand. That's why we have the 2 options here. The committee really is recommending the class set because students will have digital access. But, of course, we're bringing the 2 options to the board and have some discussion about it. It's like a $100,000 difference.
Mrs. Justice.
Ms. Simchek had her hand.
Oh,
No,
Miss-
it's okay, okay.
then Mrs. Simchek.
Yeah, I apologize. No, I think my concern is with not having textbooks at home, that not every student has access to internet at home. So it's lovely that you say they can access it and they can print it, but they may not have access to a computer at home. So was there some analysis done as to the internet access that students have currently this year that guided the recommendation of option 1?
I don't know of anyone done this year. I remember what it used to be, but I don't know of it currently.
And teachers don't feel it'll be a hindrance to the learning that needs to happen for students? I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
If we could have Becky respond to that, Ms. Teskey, because she,
Yes.
You need to come to a microphone.
yeah, come
Yeah.
to the microphone.
Becky Teskey. Basically, the clarification came from when teachers expressed that concern came up and the discussion was had, that's where the 30 came from, because there isn't a class of 30 students. Therefore, they would have that set, and if students needed to take the text home, the text could be taken home by any student who opted to take the text home. And just to clarify, there's 2 things. When you say interactive, the interactive is a license. That's the interactive portion that has many resources in it. The digital textbook is that second piece, but a lot of times we use the term and say there's, they'll all have interactive, and interactive sounds great, but we have to clarify and say they will have a digital textbook, because that is the actual textbook, but in digital form. And that's where the PDF piece came out that Doc shared when Dr. Jones said PDF. That's a different option that the anatomy physiology book had, and that's something that they shared with us when you talk about high school. With that option, even though it's not a hardback text, the teachers have said because that text is so thick, they teach it in portions. And so they would actually utilize that text in portions and print off the sections that they're doing within that piece and only use it, and the kids can write. And then you're talking about students being able to utilize it with ELA, strategies, text features, and so forth.
So I was raising my hand, forgetting that in the chair. As Doc knows, I have a little experience in this area, and I'm excited to see this as an old science teacher here. I had classroom set, and I will say that there were times where we needed slightly more than that. So if there was any interest in looking at possibly 60 per class or something like that, because you would have, it doesn't happen as often now, I guess, but like out of school suspension, or someone would get sent or get sick, and we would have to send a book with them. So the classroom set is essential, but maybe having an additional 15 or 20 or something per instructor or per course to be able to send those home. Or there are just some people like me, I prefer paper, and I learn better that way. I know that about myself. There may be other students that are that way. My daughter, she'd rather search a PDF, Control F and find whatever she needs. But for those who are analog like me, maybe a way to balance this out with a cost benefit. But that was just one thought. Mrs. Simchek.
Thank you. First, I want to say to the committee that's sitting over there, I want to say thank you. I see a lot of people that I know, and I know you're taking time out of your day today. And to hear that the committee was charged and wanted another meeting because they had to finish up instead of rushing like we sometimes do. But I really want to say thank you. Also to what you said, I have seen now that teachers are putting, from my own experience, in focus, book signed out, and so that it's there for all parents to see. I tend to be an old school person, though, and I like the hard copies, and so it would be a money thing. So I don't see Mr. Carter Morrison here, so Dr. Rendell, can you tell me what was budgeted for this? Because if we budgeted enough to cover the hard, I mean, that's really, it's a moot issue if we're under budget or over budget. That
Ms. Stemker can actually answer that question.
It was approximately 1.3 million, but I've already met with him, and we do have the funding. We have a fund source to make it happen with either way. I met with him last week.
So the short answer is we're already over budget at one.
So that
Yes.
that does, okay.
No matter what.
But, you don't know that. So with that being said, I would like, I would agree that if it's 30 to the class with a sign-up process, then I'm okay with that.
Mrs. Ork?
Well, I do know we're over budget, but science and math being the future, this is something I'm willing to try to find the funds for and accept that. And I've heard over and over that, that paper, people like to read by paper and they learn better by paper, and I totally agree with that. And as a parent trying to help my students with their science project, I prefer to have a book at home versus trying to go and log into their is it called Canvas, and trying to help them through that, because I have 2 7th graders, and it's a process. It's $99,000 difference by having the take-home book, and then when I look at if we added on the 15 or 20 books per, we'd probably be there anyways. I prefer for every student to be able to have a book sent home, because in our home we have 3 computers, but I don't want my kids on my computer. My husband doesn't want the kids on his computer, and so I really strongly hope that we do a take-home book for every student. I think that's the best.
I would love to hear from a teacher who's had to manage inventory on textbooks and had to chase down students at the end of the year to
Many
get
come
those
back
books
in the
back.
first year we
And
leave.
if the students really schlep the book to and from school every day. And I think it's great if we could have a book to keep at home or whatever. But and also now I think student preferences also come into play. There are students who don't want a paper textbook, so they would see having to be responsible for a probably $300 now, but an extremely expensive textbook. So now we're asking them to be liable for a significant piece of chattel that has to be carried around, and that teachers now have to administer and become, on top of everything else, become property custodians. I remember that was one of my least favorite things at the end of the year, is chasing kids down to get textbooks. But if that's the preference, have we done any sort of survey of students at all to see where they are, where
There
the
was a
consumer
survey
preferences
done
are?
last year.
Okay.
There was a survey done last year because we had a gap year coming up. So with the gap year coming up, we weren't sure what we were going to do. And so prior to STEM scopes being what we were able to at least have in place for this school year to get us through the year, we did it. The survey was actually just a 3 through, and I can go back and we did it on Google, like a Google Docs, and had the kids actually survey. It was 3 through 8 because we were concerned of bringing in computerized, here we're going to straight computer. These kids are used to actually having a book they're writing in is what they've had for the last 6 years. So, and it was, I'd say 50-50. For the most part, when you talk about your elementary students, many of them still, for 3rd through 5th, still wanted a text. Your 6 through 8, I don't know if it's the way that the, as time goes on, their Canvas, they don't bring the book home. Some of them don't use a locker anymore because they don't have to have a book to put in the locker, and they literally, they're just, the digital world is how they function. So the 6 to 8 was really more, I would say the outcome was more for digital use. And part of that too comes from the fact that a lot of our teachers are utilizing the science platform for ELA strategies, and so they're printing out parts and pieces of books because they need the kids to be able to write. So the kids are highlighting, they're annotating, all these strategies they're being taught to do for test-taking purposes and testing strategies. They can't do that in a textbook. Right. They can't write in that textbook. So, you're talking about textbooks you have to turn back in, like you said, they're going to be checked and check in, check out. They cost money. So there's, that's where a piece of that comes from.
Okay, so with the new, and maybe Mr. Green can help with this, with the new digital model, is it where a teacher can have the textbook linked somewhere within the student environment where they click on it or they point to a certain chapter, and then they go in and then they do what, back in the dinosaur era when I was teaching, they would have a workbook or consumable and have to do that.
It's exactly that.
Yeah.
Made dittos, right?
Right. Yeah. Whoa. With the blue ink. No, that was before my time. But
well, we giggle, but the ditto, literally the digital piece is the ditto. I mean, they change the color, they change the font, they can highlight within it, so it becomes their ditto sheet. But it goes directly to where they are within the classroom, whatever chapter, lesson, unit, whatever the teacher is on.
great. So, Mrs. Ork.
I think we should look at, though, budget. Is it going to cost the same to have 15 extra per class? Is that going to be the same as having a take-home set? Not all students will have to take it home, because I'm assuming that the parents will have to sign for that take-home. Is that the way it works?
So, but if we purchase them for every student, then we're just paying to have them sit in a warehouse somewhere. If they don't, if the student or parent chooses not to assign them out, right?
We're going to use these for 4 years or
This is
5 years?
It's a
5
5-year
years.
cycle. There are some that
So
high school is 6.
there's going to be probably loss in between, and so it's like paying for it now versus having to, it's like anything, when you buy in bulk, it's cheaper than going back in 2 years saying, hey, we need 250 more, and it's double the price because you're only buying 250 more versus buying the full amount. So that's just my thoughts, is to look at the budget. How much are they going to charge us for 15 extra per class versus how much would they charge us for the entire class, which we know is 99,000 more.
Maybe I'm.
Hang on, Mrs. Simchek and
So
then
the
Mrs.
loss
Justice.
rate, though, is still going to be the same. You supply for the class, and you're going to lose 10% for each class, let's say. So you're not going to get 10%. So the very second year, you have to go back in your one solo print, if that's your policy to have every kid take a book home, is what I'm saying. Because you're not going to have 30%, 100%, as Mr. Frost was saying, return policy. So you're still in the same hole. It's just really a policy preference in dollar.
Mrs. Justice and then Mrs. Ork.
I just want some clarification, because I have not purchased textbooks for a class before, like, I'm not the how many are in a class set? If you're a chemistry teacher, you have how many?
Well, should be 25 in a class set. I mean, there
So you have 25 in a class set, and if you're a chemistry teacher, how many students are you teaching?
25, usually 150.
Okay, so you have 25 books in your classroom, and then you're going to use those 25 books for 150 students. So we're talking about buying an extra 10 books or 15 books, or buying another 150
Right,
books.
right.
So I vote for buy the 25, buy 10 extra, make sure that we're reaching the students that we need who might need to take a book home, or 15, rather than buying 150 times physics. I mean, I vote for the 30 books rather than the 300.
You're recognized.
If I can add, one of the things about the print, and this was our concern, and the committee voiced this concern, because all the publishers said the same exact thing. We're talking about a 5-year adoption. There are changes. As much as science, history stays the same, science changes. And so digitally, these platforms will change. So like we use the example, Pluto wasn't a planet, was a planet, it's dwarf planet. It changes within the platform, almost like a current event would change. These books are going to be printed, and what they print is what that is. So if for 5 years, 6 years, we have these books, and we have, whether we have 150 of them or whether we have a class set, that class set, going back to what, Mr. Frost did say, sitting on a shelf where it has old information versus they can go right online immediately to that digital textbook that is there that has the updated information. Again, it is preference, but that's also another pro and con to what we would face with that.
Mr. Searcy?
Digital update on a regular basis?
Yes, they update it. Right now, one of the companies updates it every 6 months, but they all update it yearly.
So we've heard from the committee, we've heard from the students. I think we've heard from the board members here also. So any other final thoughts?
Yeah, sir.
Mrs. Justice.
I just want to make sure we're being mindful in everything that we do, that we're reaching every student. And that when we look at the achievement gap, or we look at different reasons why that's come into play, that we're being mindful of the fact that not every student has the same access to the same tools that other students have. There are some homes that have 0 computers. And it's not an option about who gets to use it or who doesn't get to use it. They just don't have it. So I just want to make sure that, as a school district, we're mindful of that.
Mrs. Simchick?
I just want to make sure it is addressed, though. If the class has 30, as I said, and I can tell you from it, then it can be leased out, so to speak. The only thing that I would like as an SOP for our district would be make sure each, I don't know about each class, but make sure that it rains down, that they should maybe make that note and focus. Although I have one of my sons, and again, we like the hard copy, or if he was out, or if you go on vacation, or as you said, whatever, detention, I feel that's the case where you're seeing now. I text like this. It's a clear giveaway because I don't use my thumbs where my gap is, but I totally agree with everything you've said. But there are some, when you have older people working with, and I just lay that on myself. Sorry. But, it's more
Don't go there with me.
all around. But it could be the way the student is, too, I'm just saying, it's comforting to have that book, and sometimes based on whatever your home environment is, or the student's learning skills are, or comfort level is, but I really think that if we do, I understand, I am more for the hard copy. I can tell you that, but I know I'm on the lesser side. There's few of us, and that the chances of them getting lost in as far as
the majority,
assets, it's going to just go in
the majority of our students are visual learners, and a lot of adults. But my visual learning was a book. My children's visual learning was the computer. It's just different. But when we used to have textbook adoption as a principal, we'd always order an extra 10%. That's when, for the most part, people were getting. Each student was getting a book, but we certainly want to make sure that there is access to a book no matter what we do.
So 30 per class is a good gauge.
Looking at class
Every
size,
class.
As far as high school, middle, and elementary, we'd have to look at that and then add to that.
Let's think about ESE and all of that, so we may want to do 10. 10
Okay,
to 15, like they said.
then we'd have to come back with a
Might
different.
go to 35.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I'm thinking, 35.
So that monetary amount would be.
So the monetary amount will be in the middle, and we were gonna have this on the board.
Mrs. Orr?
I would like to have that before you bring it to the board, though, how much the proposal is for the additional 10 or 15. Because I really do think it's important. Yes, we might have, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th graders that are digital learners, but we also have to look at who are the people at home, not only the people that don't have the internet access, but who are the people at home that are helping the students with their homework and trying to help them with their projects, and that's the parents. And a lot of the parents still like that book until, we can transition away from, that's not the way that parents have learned. You're always going to have that right now where parents want to have that access to that book. So that's just my concern. If it's close to the $99,000 to add these additional books, I would hope that we would go ahead and purchase the set for the take-home.
But that's my problem. I don't mind getting extra sets to be frugal, but I don't feel the custodian should be the child, because every year you're gonna lose them, when a parent can log it out.
Well, I do think, though, if a parent comes in and says, look, I really need this book, and they sign the book out, that is the parent that's going to send it back in. So that's what I'm saying by we have to look at.
Yeah, so you can with those extra books, but to have it where we pay for each class and it's automatic protocol that a book goes home to a student, I feel that we're asking for that. Whereas there might be a protocol which would probably be more on the rare side, where a parents can request the teacher, because they've got 30, may I have the book for the year for my son or daughter? And then you sign it out, you're the custodian now. But if you automatically have 150 kids per grade level, and we are only going to recoup 130, 110, or whatever back, and every year we'll be at a loss. So I agree that you should have a process to be able to sign out a book, but I just don't want the process to automatically give children books, because I agree with you, Mr. Frost, we will lose them. It's an asset, a custodian issue. You're forcing people to be custodians, and most kids don't have lockers anymore.
Right.
They don't.
Is it reasonable to ask for those figures to be developed and an A and B presented at the adoption, or do we have to have a decision before the adoption goes on the agenda?
There's several different ways we can do it. We can put together an amended proposal to option one. We can have option one. We can have an amended proposal to option one. Both be action agenda items on the board, and the board can vote up or down, go from there. If we have to be at the next business meeting to be on time, which I think we do.
Okay.
So we can easily do that.
I don't really hear a lot of will for every student getting one, because, we're spending money we don't have on something we don't need for people who don't want it. And that's not great policymaking in my mind, but.
Well,
Mrs. Orr.
well, I'm not saying to purchase it if it's more, but if it's going to cost the same, and I'm not saying for it to automatically have to be sent home, but I do think that it should be accessible if, let's say, we have a whole 25 students in the class that every parent wants a copy of that book. I want us to be able to have that accessibility to those books, only if it's the same cost to purchase 15 is what I'm saying, the 15 extra.
Okay. Mr. Schuster, you got your finger up?
Yep.
Look to Wayne, please.
If the material that's going to be in the new science book is anything like the material that's in the math program, every student needs a book. Every student needs a book, because even if you take the books home in the math program, parents they can't work it out.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be saying every student needs a book. We need to have the extras in the classroom. Budget doesn't seem to bother anybody, so, just get it done.
It bothers me.
with the books.
Mrs. Justice.
It bothers me. I want to just quickly, I think maybe I'm misunderstanding. So I just want to ask again. 25 classroom books
That's for high school.
for high school in a classroom. Okay. So we're saying 35. So let's say each book costs $10. Let's just say each book costs $10, right? Or 300. But my math, we're just going to say, let's say every book costs $1. So it costs $25 to buy those books. And then if we're going to buy 10 additional books for the classroom, then it's going to cost $35, right? How many students will be using, if we bought a classroom set, which is 25, and then we bought a book for every student taking that course, you said there were 150 students?
That's what class size amount,
So
yeah.
we're talking about 35 books
Yeah.
versus 175 books. There's going to be a cost difference. I mean, between, is my math right? Okay. I just want to make sure that my numbers are, there's going to be a difference. It's a pretty big difference, and I do care about the budget. The money does bother me. I think that if we clearly say to parents, there's a book available for you if you would like a book, and if for some reason we have a huge group of people that want books, can we get more books? I mean, if we have 20 more students out of that 150 that don't have books and they want a book, we could get them a book.
That's
mean-
correct. We can always order more books.
I just feel like it's foolish to buy 175 when we could buy 30. I mean, our students have lots of different needs, and we're already over budget, so.
Mrs. Zork.
I know you're working in dollars here, $1 per book, but we already know that those extra books are going to be approximately $99,000. So what I'm saying, if we ask the publisher for 15 extra per class and it comes out to $92,000, I think it would be foolish for us not to go ahead and purchase the full sets, extra sets for $99. So that's why I'm asking for clarification. How much is the publisher going to charge us for the 15 extra? And that is where I am.
For the record,
Justice.
if it costs $92,000 to buy 35 books versus buying 175 and it costs $99,000 to buy 175, then let's go for the 100, just for the record.
Okay. All right, so do we have a sense for how we're going to approach this without it
can just-
overly burdening the,
I think we do.
Stop.
I think we have enough to move forward.
I just want to make sure I understand the money, because I do, is it an actual decision of $99,000 more to put a hard copy in all 150 students?
In their hand in the classroom. But that's where the conversation at one point went to being a take-home book. That book would have to come back to school, though, because that is their book for the class. So that's the difference. There's actually two different conversations that started, and I think that's where the confusion might have been. A class set remains in the classroom, and then you have the extra that can be checked out and taken home by students. That would depend on how many we decide to do extra. But if you are talking about every student having an at-home book, you've just purchased.
It's more than this.
It's more than that.
It's
You're
more than
talking about
this. It's not even-
150, what Ms. Justice was just saying, at-home books, and then a class set for the classroom. So those numbers can be done, and we can do an addendum as was mentioned.
We can get the 15, get the cost of the 15.
do we have what makes sense?
But I have one.
We have
As much as
some
anything makes sense right now.
directions. We'll have to come back.
One
Well,
question.
come back on the 23rd so that we can adopt this in time, or come back next month and then we try again in
When's the deadline?
March?
Is to.
Well, according to the timeline, we would be bringing a proposal to you, an action agenda item in 2 weeks. So, but we'll have more than one.
Okay?
I just want to say that I believe, though, she was trying to talk about the scale of economy.
Sure.
And
That's
so
reasonable. Yeah.
it is important if you check on the price. So if you buy now in bulk, does the book go up double price, and purchasing is the one that's going to have to let you know? I think that's, and I just wanted to make sure that was the valid point that Mrs. Zork was making, and I do understand that point.
Right, especially if we can,
So we have the directive of 15 extra.
We're going to come up with a couple of different proposals.
35.
Yep, 35 per class versus taking one home.
Okay.
Any other questions on the science instructional materials adoption process? I would like to take a true 5-minute break to set up the next one if we could.
Okay.
But we actually will, 5 minutes.
Thank you.
5 minutes, okay,
Thank
so.
you.
All right, we are returning. Back from recess. Dr. Rendell, let's continue down the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our last presentation for today is about the Community Partnership School Model at Pelican Island Elementary. The board may recall that we've been working on this model, this project, for a couple of years now, and Dr. Torres Martinez and Mr. Kolstedt would like to give us an update on where we are right now and where we're headed and that kind of thing. And there are a lot of community members here. The community partnership model requires a partnership with your community, a lot of support by various organizations in the community to support the families at a partnership school. So they are definitely a part of the work that's going on, and you may hear from them during the presentation. Dr. Martinez.
Good afternoon, Dr. Rendell, board members. Thank you for having us. It's with much pleasure that I just look behind me and I have just a couple of members of our steering committee and our core partners in the audience and their representatives. So I want to thank them first and foremost for their time. They've been working with us for at least 2.5 years now and exploring and looking at the different components of this project. In your packets, I gave you some flyers and some informational material that really outlines what a community school is. We had a presentation back in October of 2016. And today, as Dr. Rendell has indicated, we're here to give you a brief update of where we're at and where we would like to head. So we'll start with Mr. Kolstedt. He is going to actually review the mission and vision, which they have, Pelican Island has adopted to include language regarding community partnership.
Yeah, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you all today. We are extremely excited, and again, I also want to thank the team. It is a collaborative partnership, and you in the room support us as well and we appreciate that. And all of the community members, partners come to the table, and we jointly make decisions. That brings me to the mission and vision. When we began this collaborative, we started thinking about what our mission and vision should be and should it be different. And everybody on the team, including my staff at school and the School Advisory Council, agreed that we are there to serve students, teachers, families, and community. So having that information, we moved ahead with creating a new mission and vision for this year. And we started with the Community Partnership Schools team. We talked about the language that pre-existed and what we wanted to see moving forward. Under the guidance of Amy Ellis, who was bringing us through an action plan, we focused on the mission and the vision. And we took the language, talked about it amongst our team, brought some of that language back to UCF where they did some wordsmithing. Once that was done, I brought it back to my staff. We discussed what they thought was most important. We settled on the mission and vision that you see in front of us here, brought it to the School Advisory Council. They approved it as well. And of course, it started with the Community Partnership School. So we are very excited that we now have a mission and vision that fully, wholly represents what Pelican Island is all about. And you see it here before you.
With this model, as I indicated, for the past 2.5 years, we have continuously done research, not only as a department, as a school, but as a community. And sometimes we come across things and we just embrace how well it represents. We came across this diagram, which truly represents what a community school is, and it's easy to explain. And if you could, on the right hand where it says collaborative leadership and practices, that really depicts what a community school is in terms of the decision-making process and engaging the community. It involves the parents, the students, the principal, and the community at large. It builds that collective trust and shared responsibility on the strategies for that site-based school. And what are the things that the community needs to bring into the school to make it reflect a community school. One thing that is very unique that we've uncovered throughout all our research is that community schools is a framework, but there not necessarily are two community schools that are the same because community schools are designed to meet the unique needs of the specific community that it is serving. If you go to the expanded learning time and opportunities, community schools always have those expanded opportunities for learning after school, summer school program, not only for students, but in school, but enrichment activities. One thing that was really resonated well in this diagram was that it also includes real-life experiences and world learning and community problem solving, and that is what Pelican Island has also embraced with their greenhouse and all the experiential learning environment that they have at their school. In addition to that, it has a very strong component for parent and family engagement. If you look at the blue part of the diagram, it talks about the family, it talks about how everybody supports each other, and how you involve the family for school success and community success. Ultimately, it is intended to remove the barriers within the learning community and within the community so that you could see the community flourish. One of the unique components that it has, it also includes mental and physical health within our schools. And as you know, we have our school health services, but we have two very strong partners in that area, which is the Department of Health and Treasure Coast Community Health that are side by side with us for the physical health. And we have already partnered with Sequel Care that is providing mental health services within the school as we speak. All this comes together having somebody that works side by side with the principal, and that's the person that helps coordinate all these efforts, because it's a lot of things coming from a lot of different places. So you have the community school coordinator that, as I said, works side by side with the principal and with the community-based organizations that are going to continue to provide services. With that said, the way this starts, it all starts with a needs assessment. So that's where it varies, and depending on the needs, as you continue to do needs assessment throughout the years, you determine what are the needs that are within that school. So currently, the core is really four core partners. One is the school, which is the school district and the school. Health service providers that address the health, the medical needs of the students, and or mental health, the universities, and there's always a nonprofit. In our case, Children's Home Society is our nonprofit and has been providing us support and services, especially the technical assistance in collaboration with UCF. This is another way of looking at it, so you could see that the foundation within the school and the school district, another core partner is Indian River State College, which provides for that additional support for teachers and or families through courses and or literacy or financial literacy, GED, whatever that may look like depending on the needs of that community. On the extended learning opportunity side, currently we have the 21st Century, where we do have a Moonshot Academy at the school, and we have the Environmental Learning Center. So we're doing all that through after-school programs, summer school programs, tutoring. We have mentors on youth empowerment and youth development. On the other side, we also, as I mentioned before, have the Department of Health, Treasure Coast Community, and Sequel Care that are looking into the physical health, behavioral, social, emotional. They assess, we're developing or in the process of having a pantry, and all those things that are really affect our families and our students and are the barriers to learning in our schools. One of the greatest pieces that we have is that we have a very strong partnership with United Way. United Way has kind of adopted us, and as you know, has funded us for 2 years in a row to help support that community school coordinator partnership and support the work that we're doing. We also have had numerous activities with Sebastian Police Department coming out to the school. I know that some board members, as well as Dr. Rendell and other community members, have attended the school events that we have had. One is coming up in May, so if and you can mark your calendar to attend that one, where we have numerous community-based organizations just supporting the needs of the community at Pelican Island. On your screen, you have on the left-hand side, you have cabinet members, which are composed of core partners and lead stakeholders. I have highlighted those names and organizations that have partnered with us to provide us support. They are the ones that help look at all the data that comes in from the needs assessment and provide the support and the input into what our next steps need to look at. Then on the right hand, you have the steering committee, which are numerous members of the community that have been coming together for the year, for the 2.5 years to brainstorm and put in place activities and organize our extracurricular and our events, and where we have consulted in terms of writing the 21st Century Grant, writing the grants for United Way, et cetera. Next, we just have some highlights, just a couple of pictures of the things that, activities that do go around, the vision and dental screening at the community events, the enrichment opportunities, financial literacy that was organized for members of the community, and some additional medical and health orientation and education that has happened as part of as a result of the needs assessment and what the community expressed that they would like to see in the school. So these are your documents, and I thought that this diagram was also really explanatory of what it looks like. If you see, you see the tree. I love the tree. It gives us, if we have good roots and good foundations, we built those relational trusts. We will continue to see improvement. It will provide opportunities for students with authentic family and community engagement in the school, integrating those health and mental health or social services for powerful learning activities, building healthy communities, and ensuring that our students and community is ready for college, career, and civics. It's never too early to start looking at that and giving our children and our community the focus that they need to be successful in life and to be productive. So with that, I am going to now defer to Mr. Teskey and Mr. Westbergen, and they are going to talk about the hub and our next steps. Nick?
Okay, so from the construction standpoint, it's a fairly simple and straightforward project. We're going to basically take the current multipurpose room and convert that into a new reception area, 3 new offices, 2 exam rooms, and a conference area. There's really no exterior renovations involved. It's all interior stuff. And we really think that we can get this done pretty quickly. We've got drawings together already. They're out to bid. So once we get the bids back in, we'll come to you guys for approval, and we can move forward at that time. That's the current multi-purpose room there. That'll be turned into this community partnership hub. Again, it's all interior work. Basically, we're putting in offices and walls, so it's not very extensive from a construction standpoint.
Question? Mrs. Simchek.
I don't want to say I'm uncomfortable, but I'm uncomfortable. Because it's only because I don't have the answers. When I get the answers, I might be more comfortable with. So we're taking space from a school and we're making it a health center, and that will be paid for by who and open to all students, and these are kind of things that I'm concerned about. I mean, I'm not comfortable with it. I'm not comfortable in on school premises at one school, and then it becomes a burden that we have them at other schools, and why does this school doesn't have it, and the other school doesn't have it? And and what's yours, do we rate it on salaries, and then people who have money cannot see a doctor, but those who have EBTs or Medicare or Medicaid, excuse me, they can go see, I don't know what the rules are. So if you could explain it to me.
Sure. One of the components that we talked about when we first started talking about community schools is a hub. Most of the community partnership schools, model schools, have a place at the school where services can be provided to the students and their families. That's one of the components of a community partner school model. I mean, it's one of the key components. So the idea is to have a place where the families can access all kinds of support services. We don't pay for those services. We don't, we're not taking on the cost of providing those services. We're basically taking on the responsibility to provide the space, so to speak. That's the only, skin in the game, so to speak, that we have. All these services are provided by outside agencies. This is something that has been a part of the project from the beginning, is to say, where could we do this at the school and that kind of thing. The multipurpose room is not adjacent to the rest of the campus. It's a standalone building. We're not losing any instructional space at the school. You may remember we moved 4 relocatables there last year over the summer. So we're not losing any classroom space. We're not losing any impact to instructional services and that kind of thing. The idea is that this is going to be something that will benefit the students and their families. Dr. Martinez or some others can jump in.
Yes, currently, for example, we have 2 service providers, 2 counselors that are at the school providing services for mental health services. And in order for students to benefit from those services, they need adequate space. So we've been juggling as to where to get those services, and we've made amends. They've been able to use the multi-purpose room and one, but the intent here is to have some space where students could get counseling. Those students that need it during the day, and then there are some other health services that may be provided. We typically do not only at the school, but here we would have a hub. We do dental services, dental ceilings for students. We are also in conversations of bringing additional immunization or some physical services. One of the things that community schools are known for are, more time in school. So if it's a minor health matter or issue that could be addressed at the school and the student could get back to class, or if they're, especially the dental services, students don't have to be pulled out of school to actually get those dental services if you have them scheduled within the school. So this is part of what a community school looks like, and as I said at the beginning, no 2 schools look the same, so it would depend on what the specific needs are. In addition to that, the space would also be utilized to provide training for families or support services for families that may need to come in to have those services. The multi-purpose room, like Dr. Rendell said, doesn't take away any teaching space from the school. It would just be repurposed to further address the needs of the students first and their families, and then the community as needed.
Follow-up, Mrs. Chair.
So there's things about this that I'm comfortable about and things I'm not, that I have to carve out. There's things that are unanswered because if we were providing a community area and we were going to go out to bid, but as far as Treasure Coast is coming in or who's coming in, who do we give? Because you have to go out as government and public procure that. I mean, let me just finish. So there's a lot of that, and putting sealing on cavities. Does that mean any person, because we're not supposed to take away from time from school, any student in our school, in that school, can go get their teeth sealed for free? Or what are the criteria? Because I have to know all that before I pass a project, because I'm not creating you know, a school for entitlement and people who have pay, who can afford it, cannot have those services in that school. And then we are not only taking education, but now we're adding other issues of the community, and we're diving in on, you know, it's just not, I mean, it's like we're approving a building, but what's going on in that building, I'm just so unsure of. And those would be things that I would need to know. I would clearly need to know who was handling medical, who was handling, how are we subcontracting that? Are we fair to the market? Treasure Coast shouldn't just get it. What about Indian River or Sebastian Primary? Walk-in. How are we going to solicit that? Just because they want to be a partner doesn't mean that they should with public dollar and taxpayer dollar and procurement law in the school district. I'm just saying, you could never answer all my questions at this setting. So I'm going to defer and see if I can learn anything more, glean from my partners and see if they can ask questions. But those are things I would have to know before I could say, this sounds really good in some ways, but in some ways I'm not comfortable because it involves taxpayer dollar and procurement law I'm very familiar with, and as long as it's fair, that's where I have to see. So I'd have to know the plan first before I approve the building. Because when you pull the, it's kind of backwards.
Mrs. Justice, you had your hand up.
I'm going to agree with a lot of what you just said. But the other question that I have, however, is, and Mr. Colstead is here, and I don't know if this is an appropriate time, but if it is, perhaps he could share why this program will help serve his students, what his demographic is like, what some of his student needs are. Because, as Dr. Torres Martinez stated, every school is so different. So if we could speak to Pelican Island's individual needs and why it's been chosen as a community school.
Yeah, I think if Mr. Colstead's ready to, he can share all that.
Okay, so to begin with, our demographic, we've got about 84% free and reduced lunch. So we know that we've got an economic disadvantage there for our families. We are 24% ESE students in there, so we are very high ESE. We had the highest acuity rate of any school in the district 3 years ago.
Can you explain what the
acuity rate is? A unique health problems that our school had more so than any other, so our kids were at the clinic more frequently with a bigger variety of illness. So that demographic is where we currently are. So when we're talking about, to address Ms. Simchek's, at least one thing that resonated with me, are they missing school? Well, when they're going out to try to fix some of the problems that they already have, health problems, dental problems, they're already missing school. So our goal with community partnership schools is to have them there more often. And if we can address their needs closer to home in our school or in our hub, then we're able to keep them in school more frequently. They miss less school when all is said and done. Hopefully that is the goal, to reduce the amount of illness that they have, be able to treat them more rapidly. In some cases, location is challenging for our families, even getting to some of the services that are outside of, they won't drive their kids there because they don't have vehicles. So being a community partnership school, they can have their services met right there. So it's a matter of convenience as well.
I have a follow-up question.
Follow-up.
Thank you. So you spoke to your free and reduced lunch, the poverty, 84%, was that correct that you said that? And then your ESE is 24%? So when we talk about mental health counseling or the importance of that with that student, with those demographics, what are some of the things that you see that students are challenged with that are affecting their learning in the classroom?
It's a variety. It's really a variety. And the way they get referred, all the students that get referred for mental health counseling go through what everyone is familiar with, I believe, is the multi-tiered systems of support. So, depending on what the teacher sees or the conversations that we've had with the families, some of them we've got programs working with kids that have divorced parents, some that have seen their parents die at the hands of their other parent. So some of them are in there for that. Some of them just have mental health issues that have not been yet determined, and they're being seen as well. So it's hard to target, one specific reason or criteria for that. Sequel Care basically does their own intake process to determine, what the level of need is. Did that answer the question?
Mr.
Yes,
Searcy, you're recognized.
Do you utilize the multipurpose room at all?
We had made plans to utilize a part of our facility for community partnership schools, and so we did some shifting around so that we could make this opportunity available. Yes, we were using the multi-purpose room, but we were able to utilize the other space in our school. And again, the facility and some of the concerns were, having people come on campus. The ideal goal would be to have a building that is away from the campus so that we can monitor safety for students, which is our primary goal. And as Dr. Martinez said, we're going to serve students first. In the model that we looked at in Orlando, they separated their building into two, where community comes in on one side, and they never cross paths with students who are entering on the other side. That wouldn't necessarily be our model. We may, we have to be flexible with how we do that. Maybe we see students during the school day and the parents are at night, families are at night, things like that, so that could be worked out. But the goal was to find a building that was the safest building on our campus, which provided the most space for, we can't do a classroom and have all this taking place in one classroom. So we utilized the space that we had.
I'm not in favor of a health clinic, and that's what this is. I think that's not our job. I understand all the numbers and the facts that you gave, but our business is educating kids. That's all there is to it. And this is just headed to socialism, and then the next thing you know, every school is going to want one. And we're going to have a health clinic in every school, and that is wrong. I'm not going to support it. I'll tell you that. I'm just not going to support it.
Yeah, our goal was to reduce the barriers, and our family's got a lot of barriers, so any way that we could reach out and reduce barriers was, first and foremost in our discussions was how do we reduce the barriers for our kids so that they can achieve academically.
We've got a clinic. We've got doctors all around you up there. Is it really our responsibility to make sure that they get to the dentist or get their teeth cleaned or whatever they need to do? I just don't think it is. It's not our responsibility. We didn't take them to raise.
Mrs. Ork and then Mrs. Justice.
Okay, I'd like to get off on another area, another topic here. This diagram that we see for the proposed floor plan, how much do we pay for this? Do we know? Because I think this project was approved back in October 2016, before I actually got onto the board. So I'm not, is that right? So I'm not familiar with what the budgeting for this is, so.
I don't have the budget number for
Okay.
the architectural fees offhand, but I can tell you it's
Okay.
not much.
Okay, so I hear that we need a community school coordinator at the district level, so I would like to know what does that cost? And then when I hear that United Way has helped supporting this, I believe, did we just get a check for 22,000?
20.
Or 20? So when we're saying that there's no cost to the district, I need to see that on paper. How much is it costing and who is covering the cost? And I haven't seen that. And then when we say that, we're providing the space, but it's not costing us anything. I look at when we moved the 4 portables onto the campus, I believe it was $80,000 per portable to move over there. So that was $320,000. Plus, in addition, we are paying, I think we're budgeted for $422,000 this year in our budget for portables. So when we put 4 portables at Pelican Island, because we need it now because we have to find that space, those are portables that we could have put over at Sebastian Middle School to alleviate those fees of us having to pay for that. So I haven't seen the budget for this, and I haven't seen who's paying for this. So that is what I'm requesting today.
Okay, so a couple, if I could. Mr.
You're
Chair.
recognized.
Thank you. To respond to Mr. Searcy's question, again, we aren't providing the services. We're providing access to the services. Okay, so that's one clarification. To the board, going back a little bit on the history is we have discussed the concept of a community partnership school for several years. 2.5 years ago, I think, is when we first started talking about it. And we talked about different options to pursue this. There are some districts that pay a company called Community Schools Incorporated, I think is their name. And they'll come in and they'll do it. Top to bottom, they'll run the whole thing. And the board direction at that time was we weren't interested in doing that. We don't have that kind of money to spend on something like this. Maybe look at pilot it at a school, because some districts, any Title I school, they bring in a community schools partnership model. And we the direction we got was take a look at maybe doing this as a pilot and take a look at seeing whether we can partner with our local community agencies to make this happen, not take money out of our budget to make it happen. So that's what we've been doing, cobbling together all of this support, pursuing grants with UCF, United Way, to make this happen. We are already providing some of these services in the school, and we do this at other schools. And the idea was if you put them all in one location, you take them out. Right now, we're doing it in the main office building. So when the service providers come in, they're now entering the main campus. By putting them out here in this hub, they're not going to be entering the main campus and that kind of thing. So those are some things to answer some of your questions or concerns. The 4 portables that were moved to Pelican Island were there for student growth. We haven't seen that student growth at Pelican Island yet. So those rooms are available to be used for instructional purposes, some of the instructional purposes that Mr. Colstead may have been using in the multipurpose room. But again, some of these services were already being provided, either in the multipurpose room or on the main campus. Dr. Martinez?
Yes, I would like to add that as a district and an organization, the Department of Health is our health service provider. We do have clinics in our schools with health assistants and or nurses, and they are one of our primary partners. We do some health in the school that impacts students. Dental sealants have been in our schools for a while. Part of it is done through the Department of Health, and part of them has historically been done through Treasure Coast Community Health, which are the partners that actually do the dental sealants at several schools. The purpose of the hub is really to coordinate all those services, as Dr. Rendell said. Instead of having the counselors all around the building looking for space to do this mental health counseling that is needed for the students, and when they are able to do case management. So when we partner with, for example, Sequel Care, all the services are in-kind services. They do their billing, and they bring the services into our school. The same is for the Department of Health, Treasure Coast Community Health, and or, as I mentioned, Sequel Care. We are in the process of working with them, and as Dr. Rendell said, they are already servicing our kids, and it's coordinating it all in one place to actually expand and be able to have that family engagement and meet the needs of those families that have so many barriers and lack so much. For example, it could be a food pantry and have an area where instead of having this in the office and doing the backpack and the food pantry pieces, it goes into, our schools are already doing it, but they're doing it in bits and pieces. So this is a way of coordinating all the services under one roof. The multi-purpose room was not a classroom. It was utilized more for indoor PE and or parent engagement activities, is my understanding. Yep.
So just to address the portables, we did get 4. One of them actually replaced one that was pre-existing, that it was just a replacement. There was already a class in there. What we did with the multi-purpose room, what was running in the multi-purpose room was our PE, and that was it. Other than our community events, it was used for indoor PE on rainy days and cold days, things like that. We were able to put 3 of our classrooms out into those pre-existing new portables. So the 3 portables actually do have classrooms in them. So every classroom that we currently have does have a class in it. So, they're not sitting there with, nothing in them. We had one teacher last year that was in a double classroom, and that's where we've now relocated the PE teacher. So we've utilized all the space that we can possibly utilize. So we were very fortunate, actually, to get those portables, because otherwise we would not have had a place really to put kids.
Mrs. Simchek.
Thank you. And so I just want to clarify.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You had your hand up.
No, it's okay, go ahead.
So the parts that I was comfortable with are originally and still are the ones that I'm comfortable with. When we are doing governmental services through the health department, and instead of you getting out of your office, so the behaviorist has to go in because this is his period with Johnny, and you're creating a spot for a community school, or maybe for the evening to have GED through the school district, or services like that, I'm comfortable with that. You can tell me how we get to Treasure Coast performing medical clinics as an outside service without going out to bid. That is like a big eyebrow raiser to me. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, I'm not in favor of a clinic in the school. I'm in favor of providing you an area where the community can come together and where you can take those services that we're receiving and have that there. And when you can expand after hours for community, as you're talking about. But I am not for creating clinics in our school. That is the part that is not, I'm not on board with. Whatever services we're getting governmental right now and you need space for and that can be used at night to further community unity. I've been in that school for Boy Scouts. I was surprised not to see Pelican Island Audubon and what happened to our scrub jays. But that's the type of school, community school, that I'm comfortable with as a legislator.
Just so you know, Audubon is with us. We just don't
Okay,
list them
okay.
there. We have lots and lots of partners. These are just the ones that come and sit at the table.
Okay.
Mrs. Justice, you're next, and then Mrs. Ork, and then Mr. Searcy.
So one of the things, that's unique about being a parent in the school system is sometimes you experience different things through your children, right? So you get to, my son, my youngest son has a fairly severe speech impediment. And he also, when he went through vision screening at the school, which we do, came back that he needed glasses. Now, a lot of people in my family wear glasses. I was not aware he needed them, and he needs glasses badly. So I took him out of school and took him to the eye doctor. He wasn't allowed to sign up to get those speech services until I had addressed the glasses issue, because the state won't provide the speech services. We're not allowed to provide those services until and all of those other things are addressed. There are students who now don't necessarily always get the services they need because sometimes the parents are not unwilling. Sometimes the parents are unable to or do not have the resources or the understanding to get to that point. So, one of the things that Dr. Hodge, when he visited us from ULC, spoke about that really struck me was that he talks about SAME and about social, academic, moral education, and that we, schools in general, used to be in charge of the academic education. So to Mr. Searcy's point, I totally agree with you. We should be providing an education to our students. That social and moral part, our country has changed. So while I share your questions about the funding, and I share some questions. I don't necessarily like the way this was presented today. I feel that it's incomplete. But I do also understand that, our job is to educate students, so providing them with connecting them with as many community services as we can, being that link, because they're our kids. So if we can help to provide that link in some way, then I want to be able to do that. And every child deserves that. Every child deserves to be healthy and to get to have the same chance in life.
Mrs. Ork, you're next, and then Mr. Searcy.
No, you're up.
Yeah.
You're up. You can speak.
No, I don't mean to keep harping on the portables, but when I look at the size of the multi-purpose room, my husband's a builder, I see 3 classrooms here. So, and then those portables could be at some other location. That's the way I see this here. All I'm asking for today is, I'd like to see the budget on this. What personnel are we going to have to hire? What staff needs to be also included in that? And then how are we going to pay for this? That's what I want to know.
Mr. Searcy, after that.
Full cost of the program, number one. But how many square feet happen to be in this building? Do you know? I mean, is it 2 portables? I mean,
See about 240?
It's probably about 2,000 square feet in that building, rough estimate right now.
and what,
So
how many
a
square feet?
portable is about 824 square feet.
So you
So
got
roughly
three.
3.
So the biggest question, what are you going to do on rainy and cold days? Or you can't take your kids out in the cold and the rain. This is what, you know, one place to do PE.
No, we moved them into a building. She's got a PE
So
room.
you have an adequate place for them. I just, this could have been used for classrooms. And the next thing's going to happen is the other schools that we have, they got this at Pelican Island, so we've got to have one down at Vero Beach High School. We got to have one at all the schools because we've got to be alike. It's just, you know, and we've sort of been shoved into this thing. Well, you know, we talked about it 2 years ago, and we've started on it, but now we've got to expand and take classrooms or take buildings out of use of our students and put it into a community facility. It just doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense. Okay, I'm done.
All right, well, after everyone else has exhausted themselves. I just need more information. And, you know, when I look at something, I look at three things. Do I like the product? Can I afford it? And then is this the company, or, you know, is it something, are these the people with whom I want to do business? The last one, done. These are good people. I know that. I'm not so certain about what the deliverables are and the benefits there. And then the second piece that I've heard my fellow board members ask about are the revenue streams and the expenses and the costs. You know, I'm a simple man. Just give me a business plan. You can put it on one spreadsheet. I can look at it and be happy, but we don't really have any of that here. We have a schematic we have a floor plan, which seems premature when we don't know what the deliverables are. How will we know this program has been successful? I mean, sure, we can point to some of the academic things, but it seems like that this even goes outside of some of those academic things. There may be some ancillary benefits that aren't just scholastic, and whether or not we feel that's the role of government or the role of the school district, we need to know what those would be before we even consider that. So I would love to have my support earned on this, but right now it's just I don't know enough about it. I don't know the costs, the benefits, or anything along those lines. So for that reason, I guess I'm echoing sort of everything everyone said here.
I just want to add one more thing.
Thank you, Mrs. Simchek.
Thank you. I would like to, you know, maybe like in bullet point, I still want to know how you can just put one source, single.
Mrs. Simchek, I don't do that. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
source the healthcare.
no, I
I'm the
mean-
director of facilities.
No, I know that we're going to do.
Puts walls up.
Well, I mean, how do we get away with not putting out to bid? What I'm saying, you can't just pull Treasure Coast in. You have to put that out, and then, you know, you have to do that. We have to, by law. But I would like to be able to, with everything that Chairman Frost said, but for me, I would need acceptable services, because if I was to approve something, I would want to be able to say that I approve these are the acceptable uses for this building. And there's no outside, coloring outside the lines, because next thing you know, there's this, and it went against my core fiber. So that's what I was saying. There was like, we might be using this, and we might be doing this, and I don't know. And I can't say yes to something when I don't know what is the list. And then we could have a full discussion. Well, that has to be off, but the other 6 are, you know, I mean, but just to say these are some of the community uses, I'm uncomfortable with that.
Well, and to that point, like there's a difference between Farm Share, which is a great program, if we were using the pantry and Farm Share to distribute excess crops by local producers versus a Saturday morning farmer's market. Those are different gradients of you know, acceptable uses, and I think that, you know, really getting our hands around what the deliverables are for this project or this program would be very helpful in persuading me, I can't speak to everyone, but persuading me to get fully on board with this. Mr. Searcy.
Does our wellness center handle any of the functions that you're talking about providing in this facility? The wellness center we have
Wellness
up
center
by
is
the
for
bus
our
stop.
employees.
I'm sorry?
The wellness center is for our employees.
Yes, but we have talked, or there's been rumors or talk about possibly expanding that up to the North County. And is there a way you can coordinate those two together and have the wellness center, a branch up there, and maybe in this facility, because we know that works, and expand their duties to include all these services you're talking about adding? I don't know that.
Let's let them answer, and then we'll come back to you, Mrs. Simchek.
I can tell you right now that that's a problem coming out of the fund.
Right, that's a good point. Got to keep them separated.
You can go first.
So I just want to add that the services, the mental health services, the physical services are all in-kind services. Some of them are school-based services that we already have in place in partnership with the school health, which is the Department of Health. So when it comes to the students, we do have those services in existence. We would be coordinating extra services. And with the mental health services, it's something that we have at other schools at smaller scales. This would be this right now is at a larger scale depending, as Mr. Coates has said, this is a school that has a higher acuity, so there are children with significantly more needs and hence families with more needs. So ultimately, the goal is to have a school that has wraparound services that looks at the whole child and the family and removes the barriers to access. One of the things that Mrs. Justice shared was actually those access points. So if a student needs, for example, a vision and the parents don't have the ability to take them or is too far or they don't have transportation, we would be able to do that at school. Those are things that we already do partially at schools, the vision testing, but we would have additional supports in collaboration with existing partners. To Mrs. Simchik's point, we would be entering in agreements that the board would approve. So these agreements, when it comes to the medical piece or anything like that, would have to be board-approved agreements. Right now, we have agreements with Sequel Care, but those are not invasive or medical types of agreements. With the dental ceiling, that's something we already do with the Department of Health and Treasure Coast. So these are the partners that are at the table. They don't all have to be exclusive. We also talked about Indian River State College coming in and doing some teacher preparation, some GED for families. All that is based on grants that they already have and in-kind services. So we really are looking at a facility and a hub to be able to coordinate those services, but the majority of the services will be in kind.
Mrs. Justice.
May I ask Principal Costa another question about classes? Can you just explain, you have 24% ESE population at your school. I know you and I have had a discussion before, and you said you want all the kids. You are, Jamie Vollmer talks about all the blueberries, you take all the kids, right? So parents come to you, their students have needs. And so can you just talk a little bit about the classes that you have on your school? I just want to have a good picture in my head when we move forward about what your school looks like.
In relation to ESE specifically?
Just in general, what the classrooms that you have.
Well, we've got four teachers of every grade level except for 5th grade, and that's all just gen ed with students with IEPs mixed into those classrooms. If they have the ability to be included in classrooms, we include them in the classrooms. Outside of that, we have 2 varying exceptionalities classrooms, which is our K to 2 and our 3 to 5, so it's split into 2. And they deal with, because there's varying exceptionalities, it could be a range of special needs that cannot necessarily be met in a full day program in gen ed. So when we have the opportunity, those students do go in gen ed to receive as much service as they possibly can. We also have an EBD cluster, emotional behavioral disorder classroom as well, which at the moment has 8 students in it, and we are working on that. They do the same thing. They go into the classrooms when it's socially appropriate for them or academically appropriate for them. At the moment, we're doing interventions with our coaches. That's completely different, but those are interventions. So, every student, we also have pre-K programs that are ESE as well. So we've got an autistic unit, which has about 6 kids in it now, I believe, another ESE pre-K, and then 2 regular pre-K programs.
So my experience at Pelican Island has been that there are many different students with many different needs, as is the same at a lot of our schools. But it's always struck me the love and attention that you give to all of the students at your school. So I just want to say that while I know we have a lot of questions, I think, speaking for myself, I appreciate the attention to all of the students' needs that you give at Pelican Island, and I know that the parents feel. I spent some time at your community school days, and I know the parents feel Similarly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I want to direct the board members to a piece of paper we haven't covered yet. It's in your packet. It's a chronological history of some of the events that have been occurring at Pelican Island as part of the community schools, community partner schools project. As is stated a couple different times today, we've already been doing a lot of this work. This stuff's already been happening in the buildings. We've already been providing a lot of the community partner school services, and we do it at a lot of our other buildings as well. The hub is probably one of the only differences in moving forward. One of the things that is different about what we've been doing at Pelican Island, trying to make, take the next step to make it a true community partnership school model, was to provide the hub and maybe bring in some additional services. But, this is something that, we've been doing a lot of these services already. It's already been making a big difference in the community around Pelican Island and the students and families that attend Pelican Island. So, this is something that we were just going to ramp up and take to the next level. Some of you have asked for data, like what are the deliverables, I think was the term that was used. This group has been researching the community partner school model for several years. They have visited several other schools. There is a lot of data to show what an impact a community partner schools model can have on student achievement, student attendance, student well-being, and that kind of stuff. So we'll gather some of that data that they know, that they've been looking at over the course of the last couple of years, and provide you with information. I think that's what I've heard from most of you today, is that you want more information. So we will go back and try to find the information that you're desiring and provide it to you before we, take any other steps.
Mr. Searcy.
Have, is there any way, I know we don't track students like I would like to see tracked, but is there any way we can track the students that we had in this program back in 15 and 16 and 17 and see what kind of impact we're having on their life? I mean, just saying we did it 15, 16, and 17, that's good, and there's a lot of research on it, but what difference is it making for us? Because if it's not making any difference, the building doesn't matter. We're just marking time. Is there any way we can get?
I would just say it's different depending on the service, because it depends on what the kid gets. It's not a package deal where, we can measure who got what and where did they go. Some things are very small. Some things, Sequel Care comes to see some of our students for, just a few minutes. Sometimes they touch base with them. Sometimes they spend an hour with them. So, the degree of services or the items that the students would get as far as services go differ. So it'd be very challenging to go back and see anyone who was ever touched by services, depending on what it is. For example, backpack buddies are part of the program where they get food given to them. We'd have to go back and find out, well, who actually got backpack buddies, and then when new families come in, we add them. So it's a continuum. No one's ever locked into a tracking service. It would be very, very challenging and time-consuming to find everybody who's been touched by community partnership schools.
So the answer is no.
The answer would be no for any students who have received minimal services. The answer would be yes if we identified services that specific students have had.
How do you measure success of the program? How do you measure it?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, attendance could be one of them, because that's one of the goals, is to increase attendance. The difficulty at our school is we've got such a transient population that, some of those numbers factor in that have never been affected by any program yet that we have, and some that have. So it's our school, we have never, since I've been there, even with the waiver system, we've never denied a student to come to our school. So whether they've got special needs, no matter what their income level is, no matter what their behaviors are, we take them all. So those kids come in and out. They choose when they come and go. We don't kick kids out of our school. So it's very difficult because they're, some here, some gone, some receiving services, some not. So to answer your question, it's very difficult to target specifically who is receiving the service.
Mrs. Simchek.
Thank you. I'm sure that all of these have been improvements. I can't imagine none of these have not improved the quality of our students and the families. And because I can't speak for other people, but for me, a hub is fine. That was my vision of this. If the health department said, I'm going to do a North County Health Department for students in this community school where they can be checked out, that's fine. I have a problem with the extra services part. So I am all, I can tell you, I know this has to make a difference, but I am all for the hub. I do need the cost of it is to us, and all the existing services. And if the health department or other areas said we have, you know, like for you, you had a hub to do it, and then you have evening courses, or as I said, that's where your Girl Scouts are, that's where the community is. But it's the extra that's just for me, that will never change for me. That's how I feel our role is of education. That's just me, that's my conservative. We are in charge of education. We will work in partners with families, but we cannot do the family stuff for them as far as that you know, we can't create clinics and Bible studies as much as I would like. And that was one of the things I will say. I had seen, you know, we do let churches rent spaces and they pay. But when they use the marquee, that was the first time I said, no, we have to separate. Because we have to separate that. That's the way I feel our role is. I'm only one of 5 people up here. And so every service we get, I would love to provide this hub for you, for every existing service. So that you don't have to have your behaviorist kicking somebody out 3 days a week because you don't have that extra, that room for them. So I want you to know that there's aspects, a majority of the aspects of this project that I support. It's just when you start throwing those extras, it's a button pusher for me.
Understood.
Well, I would like to say thank you for bringing this and for bringing the ideas and for all you've done. I mean, thank you, Dr. Rendell, for pointing to the relationships and the history of that, and offer a bit of encouragement. It seems as though one of the main purposes of this presentation was to focus on a building. And I can tell you one thing, in my, I don't have a whole bunch of years, but I've been around different education settings, and I can tell you the magic that happens in the building is much more important than the building. And I know that it would be nice to have the dedicated space or something along those lines, and I'm not saying that that's not going to happen, but the good news is no matter the outcome today, the magic is still happening. I want to thank you for all of that.
I think we're done.
Okay, thank you so much.
That was the last presentation.
Last presentation? Okay, well, I wasn't sure if you had anything else.
Sure,
scheduled
I'm
here.
sorry, yes, that's
Yeah.
our last presentation.
Okay, I did want to say I welcome the exchange, and again, it is unfortunate that some of these conversations have to happen fully on TV and everything like that, but I do value and respect all my colleagues, and I thank you so much for your input. Anything else? Nothing else before us, we are adjourned. Yabba dabba doo.